Imagine waking up in the Middle Ages, already past 30, with aching knees, worn teeth, cold straw beneath your back, and a winter cough everyone is pretending not to fear. In this world, surviving childhood was only the beginning. Every meal, every fever, every muddy road, every freezing night could decide whether you saw another spring. Tonight, you step inside that brutal reality not as a king or knight, but as an ordinary soul trying to stay alive. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy slow, immersive journeys into the medieval past. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and let's walk into the Middle Ages together. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing beneath the west gate of a medieval town just as dusk lowers its grey woolen hood over the world. Cold stone presses its chill into your shoulder where you lean, waiting for the guard to finish counting a cart of turnips as though each one may be plotting treason. Damp straw clings to the soles of your boots. Smoke gathers in the rafters of the gatehouse above, and somewhere beyond the walls. Monastery bells murmur through river mist like old men clearing their throats. Torchlight flickers along the iron-studded doors. A horse exhales a white cloud into the winter air. Your cloak smells faintly of wet wool, wood smoke, and the sort of road mud that medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You are past 30 now, which in this place means you're not exactly ancient, but you're certainly no fresh spring lamb either, and to be gently honest, you probably would not last a week out here without luck, neighbours, and a very forgiving stomach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the guard waves you through at last, you may leave a little note below telling where you're listening from, and what the local time is in your corner of the wide, sleepy world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pass under the arch, and the town receives you with a sigh of smoke, damp timber, and close-packed living. The street beneath your boots is not so much paved as persuaded into shape by generations of wheels, hooves, rain, and feet. In the ruts, muddy water reflects thin strips of torchlight. Above you, the upper stories of houses lean toward one another like tired neighbours sharing gossip across the lane. Their wooden beams are dark with age, and their plaster walls hold the day's chill. A woman shakes rushes from a doorway, scattering herbs among them so the floor inside may smell a little less like everyone who's ever walked across it. Rosemary, perhaps, or meadowsweet. No one can quite agree whether sweet herbs truly keep sickness away, but nearly everyone agrees they are better than the alternative, which is simply smelling the truth. You draw your cloak closer. 30 winters counted. 30 summers survived. In another world, that number may pass without ceremony, tucked somewhere between ambitions and errands. Here, it sits on your shoulders like an extra garment. Not a crown, not a curse, but something felt. You're old enough to remember bad harvests by name, to know which bridge floods first, which baker stretches flour with ground peas, which priest coughs through the longest sermons, and which neighbour always borrows an iron pot and returns it with mysterious dents. You're also old enough to feel rain in a knee that once twisted beneath a loaded cart, old enough to chew carefully on the left side because one tooth has become a small private enemy, old enough to notice the younger apprentices dart through the street with the rude confidence of people whose backs have not yet sent formal complaints. Still, you're here. That matters. The town is closing itself for night. The gate behind you groans as it is drawn inward, heavy oak against iron hinges, and the sound moves through the lane like the closing of a giant chest. A boy carries a bundle of kindling nearly as wide as himself. A butcher rinses his board with water that runs pink only for a moment before the mud accepts it without comment. Two women argue softly over the price of onions. Somewhere a dog barks, then thinks better of it, then barks again because dogs, unlike monks, do not keep regular hours. You move toward the market square, following the smell of hot pottage. The houses open into a wider space where stalls stand half-folded for the evening, their awnings sagging with rain. The town cross rises at the centre, pale in the dimness, with a few old wax drippings clinging to its base from prayers offered at all hours and for all reasons. Some prayers are for safe childbirth, some are for a missing cow, some, whispered by those who have passed 30 and feel each season more sharply, are simply for one more winter endured without fever, famine, or the sudden interest of a tax collector. At the edge of the square, you see a man with a beard gone white in patches, though his hands are still strong as roots. He sits on an overturned crate mending a leather strap by candle stub. People nod to him as they pass, not because he is wealthy, for his cloak is patched and his shoes are almost philosophical in their openness, but because he has remained in a place where illness may empty a bed in 3 days, where a cut from a sickle may turn angry, where childbirth may carry off the young and hunger may stoop the proud. Remaining becomes its own kind of authority. He has seen things. He knows which roof beams are sound and which lord's promises are lighter than chaff. He knows that when geese fly low before Martinmas, some swear it means a hard winter, though others say geese are simply dramatic birds with strong opinions. You stand near a brazier outside an alehouse and warm your hands over the coals. The heat is small but sincere. Around you gather travellers, townsfolk, and servants sent on errands they have stretched as long as possible. A girl with flour on her sleeves balances a trencher wrapped in cloth. A carter drinks from a wooden cup, his beard collecting ale with more devotion than dignity. Beside him, a narrow-faced pilgrim shows off a pewter badge from a shrine 2 counties away. Though whether he has truly walked there or bought it from a cousin is difficult to tell. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about such things, especially when ale is present and memory becomes generous. You listen. That is what you do at 30 and beyond. You listen more than you boast. The younger ones speak of strength, of speed, of work they can finish before noon, of how little sleep they need. You once spoke that way too, perhaps. Now you know the body keeps accounts better than any steward. Every frost, every missed meal, every night spent under a leaking roof, every cart pulled from a ditch, every fever sweated through beneath a wool blanket. It all leaves a mark, some visible, some hidden. A person does not grow old here by drifting gently down a river of birthdays. A person grows old by bargaining with cold, hunger, infection, childbirth, labour, grief, and chance, and by waking again anyway when the cock crows in the dark. The alehouse door opens, spilling a golden rectangle onto the mud. Inside, rushes cover the floor, though they have not been changed recently enough to satisfy anyone with the delicate soul. Smoke gathers under the black rafters before finding its way through a hole in the roof, or failing to. A beeswax candle burns near the counter, expensive and clean-smelling, likely reserved for the owner's careful pride, while cheaper tallow dips spit and gutter along the wall. You duck inside, and warmth folds around you, thick with breath, malt, damp cloaks, and onions. A woman at the hearth stirs a pot of pottage with a wooden paddle. Barley, leeks, peas, perhaps a shred of bacon if fortune has wandered in wearing boots. She glances at you, measures your age, your cloak, the mud on your hem, the careful way you lower yourself onto the bench. You're not a noble guest. You're not a beggar either. You're somewhere in that wide middle band of humanity that does most of the carrying, mending, digging, waiting, praying, and paying. She ladles you a bowl. The first spoonful is hot enough to scald your pride, so you blow across it and wait. Patience, too, is something age teaches, usually by punishing its absence. The pottage tastes of earth and smoke and salt. Not much salt, but enough to remind you that salt is dear. Your bread is coarse, dark, and chewy, the sort of bread that asks your teeth several pointed questions. You answer as best you can. Near the hearth, an old widow ties red thread around a child's wrist while murmuring a charm against night terrors. Some swear red thread confuses ill-wishing spirits. Others say it is nonsense, but leave it tied anyway, because no sensible person wants to be the one who tests every superstition personally. Above the mantel hangs a sprig of dried rowan, its berries shriveled, a charm, a habit, a decoration hard to say, even now. It is hard to tell whether people believe such things because they are foolish, or because the world gives them so many reasons to be afraid and so few tools to hold against the dark. The bells sound again from the distant monastery, slower now, marking an hour by which the town breathes and settles. Men at the benches cross themselves without quite pausing in conversation. A woman near the door counts coins by touch. The suspicious monk you noticed at the gate enters briefly, hood drawn low, eyes moving over the room as though searching for someone or avoiding someone else. He buys no ale, only asks for hot water, which earns him the sort of silence usually reserved for tacksmen and poets. Then he leaves, taking a small wrapped bundle beneath his robe. No one comments immediately. This is a town, after all, and silence is sometimes just gossip saving its strength. You finish your bowl slowly. Outside, the mud darkens. Inside, the fire lowers and reddens. Around you are faces marked by labour, weather, missing teeth, old scars, and the wary calm of people who understand that survival is not a single grand victory but 1,000 small negotiations. A dry roof tonight, a warm meal, a neighbour who will lend a hand at harvest, a charm tied to a wrist, a candle saved for sickness, a story told softly enough not to wake trouble. You are past 30, and here that means you have become a keeper of warnings. Do not drink from that ditch. Do not trust spring warmth too early. Do not ignore a swollen finger. Do not mock the old woman who knows which herb eases a cough. Do not sleep with wet feet if you can help it. Do not assume tomorrow's bread because today's loaf is in your hand. Yet it also means you carry a quieter gift. You know how to endure an uncomfortable bench. You know how to make a cloak serve as blanket, pillow, curtain, and moral support. You know when to speak, when to nod, and when to let a fool argue himself into buying the next round. Later, when the alehouse keeper points you toward the common hall where travellers may sleep for a few coins, you rise carefully, feeling that old knee remember the road. The dog from the square appears in the doorway as if it has been appointed your escort. It is brown, narrow, damp, and confident in the way only unwanted dogs can be. You step into the night, and it follows. The town has gone soft with darkness. Shutters are closed. The market stalls crouch like sleeping animals. Somewhere, behind an oak door, someone coughs long and hard, then quiets, somewhere else. A baby cries, and a tired voice hums a lullaby older than the stones beneath your feet. Above the roof line, the monastery tower stands black against a clouded sky. Its bell has marked your arrival, your meal, and now you're turning toward rest. You cross the square with the dog padding behind you, and the smell of wet wool rising from your cloak. You have survived the gate, the mud, the first cold hour of evening. It is not much, perhaps. Yet in this world, not much is often enough to begin with. The night never becomes truly silent in the common hall. It only rearranges its noises. You lie beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of lanolin, smoke, and several previous owners, and you drift in and out while the room settles around you. One man snores like a saw dragged through damp timber. Another mutters through a dream and paws at the air as if still counting sacks in some granary of the mind. From the far side of the hall comes a cough that rises, rattles, and then fades into the dark rafters, where soot hangs in black folds above the sleepers. The half-burned candle left in an iron holder at the wall has long since guttered out, yet its sweet trace of beeswax remains, mixed with colder smells of damp hay, old leather, and feet that have walked farther than they care to admit. When morning comes, it does not burst in heroically, it seeps. Grey light pushes through the shutters. A draught creeps under the oak door and finds every gap in your blanket with the patience of a tax collector. You wake because your shoulder has gone stiff. Your neck objects to the rush-stuffed pallet, and that old knee, the one that remembers the loaded cart better than you would like, gives a small but unmistakable sermon on the consequences of sleep. Reaching 30 does not make you ancient here, but it does mean your body begins delivering commentary at dawn, whether invited or not. You lie still a moment, listening. The town is stirring beyond the walls, a cartwheel bumping over stones, a cock crowing with suspicious confidence, the distant bell from the monastery marking prime. A few of the others are already up, wrapping cloaks around themselves and blowing into their hands. In the pale light, age shows differently than it does by fire. Last night everyone seemed bronze and shadowed and a little mysterious. This morning they are simply human. You see swollen knuckles, stooped shoulders, the careful way a woman straightens her back one vertebra at a time. You hear the hissed breath of a mason pulling on one boot, because bending is a negotiation. You notice how an old scar whitens the temple of the carter from the alehouse, and how he rubs it absently as if weather may still speak through it. You sit up slowly and regret doing so quickly, which is the sort of lesson the body enjoys teaching more than once. Straw crackles under the blanket. The wool of your tunic is cold when you pull it on. Your fingers feel thick in the morning air, and for a little while they do not entirely belong to you. This, too, is part of surviving beyond 30 in the Middle Ages, not some grand declaration of old age, but these small negotiations with stiffness, chill, and the memory of labour stored in bone. Across from you, a woman with a lined face and 2 silver pins in her veil is rubbing goose grease into her wrists. She notices you watching and nods as though you have joined a private guild. Best before the joints wake properly, she says, and flexes her hands until the knuckles crack. Some swear by goose grease for aches, especially if it has been warmed with rosemary or rue. Others insist that a poultice of mallow does more. No one can quite agree whether either truly works. But people keep jars of both because hope, in this world, is a practical item. Nearby, the white-patched bearded man from the square yesterday is working a strip of cloth around his knee. He binds it firmly, tucks the end, and pats it with satisfaction. Vinegar and wool, he murmurs to no one in particular, keeps the devil of the cold out. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the devil is involved in sore joints, but in a damp stone town with winter in the walls, it is easy to understand why people suspect malicious assistance. You rise and move toward the small brazier at the centre of the hall, where embers still glow beneath ash. A boy is coaxing them back to life with a twist of straw. It takes him 3 attempts and a face of heroic concentration. The little flame catches at last, and he looks as pleased as a king taking a city. Fair enough. Fire before dawn earns respect. You hold your hands over it and feel pins and needles creep through your fingertips. Beside the brazier sits a man no older than 40. Though his beard is already sparse and pale, he's pulling one tooth with his tongue as if it might come away through persuasion alone. Toothache lives everywhere here. It hides in coarse bread, in years of grinding grain with traces of grit, in little abscesses that begin as nuisances and become tyrants. The man gives you a rueful glance. "Loose again," he says. You make the sort of sympathetic sound one offers when there is nothing useful to add. An apothecary once told me a worm lives in every bad tooth, he says. Tiny thing. Gnaws from within. Some swear this is true. They will hold a candle near an aching jaw and claim the heat drives the toothworm mad. Others rinse with sage, or chew cloves when they can get them, or carry a charm scratched with a saint's sign. The poor often do all 3 and still lose the tooth in the end. Here, even your mouth keeps a record of the years. You run your tongue, almost by habit, along the troublesome place on your own left side and feel the dull tenderness waiting there. A small familiar enemy, nothing dramatic. Just one more reminder that survival is less about avoiding damage than about carrying it. The hall's keeper arrives with a wooden bucket of water and a basin that has seen better centuries. One by one, people wash their faces, not so much becoming clean as briefly less medieval. The water is cold enough to make you fully conscious against your wishes. You splash your cheeks, rake fingers through your hair, and feel life return in an orderly but reluctant fashion. Nearby, a younger traveller laughs at how everyone grunts while standing up, as if this is the most amusing discovery on earth. The room gives him the indulgent look reserved for those who still think youth is a personal achievement. You step aside to tug on your boots. The leather is stiff, and the mud dried along the hem reminds you of yesterday's road. Outside the shutters, light strengthens over the town roofs. The brown dog from last night is curled just beyond the threshold, nose beneath tail, and when the door opens a crack, one eye appears to confirm that you're still in service as its person. It thumps its tail twice against the floorboards without rising. A fair arrangement. The dog believes in you modestly, which is more than can be said for many institutions. At the far end of the hall, the suspicious monk from the alehouse stands by a narrow window, adjusting the cord at his waist. In daylight he looks less sinister and more tired, which may be true of most mysteries. His hands are red with cold. He catches you looking, nods once, and then presses a little linen pouch against his ribs beneath the robe, checking that it remains there. Relic, medicine, stolen cheese, who can say? Even now. It is hard to tell whether men hide sacred things out of devotion, or merely because everyone else asks awkward questions. A woman begins combing out her hair with a bone comb, slow strokes in the morning dimness. She pauses to pick through the teeth of it and drop something into the fire without comment. Daily life is full of humble battles no minstrel bothers to sing. Lice, damp stockings, smoky lungs, cracked heels, chilblains on fingers, sleep broken by coughing neighbours, and the endless ache in shoulders from carrying, lifting, turning, kneading, wringing. To survive beyond 30 is to become familiar with maintenance. You warm the hands, rub the knee, wrap the chest, chew on the good side, rest when you can, and continue mostly because there is nothing else to do. The hall brightens a little more. Someone shakes out a cloak. Someone else hunts for a lost iron key in the straw and finds instead a spoon, 2 nutshells, and a pilgrim badge bent at the pin. The keeper grumbles that the rushes ought to be changed. He has likely been grumbling this for years, perhaps with justice. A woman near the door stretches and says her back feels like a badly stacked woodpile, which is vivid enough that no one asks her to elaborate. There is a quiet fellowship in all this, not cheerful exactly, but steady. The young may speak of feats, the older speak of remedies, weather signs, and which side of the hearth is least draughty. You stand again by the reviving brazier and let its warmth settle into your bones as best it can. Around you the others gather themselves piece by piece, blankets folded, belts tied, cloaks fastened with bone pins or simple brooches, shoes laced, complaints murmured, hopes kept modest. No fanfare attends the work of staying alive past 30. No trumpets, only cold mornings, careful movements, and the stubborn refusal to let an aching body have the final word. When at last you lift your cloak and feel its weight fall around your shoulders, it is almost a comfort. Wool over bone, habit over hardship. Outside waits the day, damp and grey and demanding. But for one quiet moment you remain in the draughty hall among the breathing, creaking, muttering survivors, and you understand that age here is not counted only in years. It is counted in scars you no longer explain, in teeth you favour, in joints that foretell rain, in remedies tied up with string, and in the patient skill of rising once more from a poor bed to meet another ordinary morning. Outside the common hall the morning waits with its hands tucked into its sleeves. The town is still half drowsing, though hunger, being an early riser, has already begun its work. You step into the lane and feel the cold bite through the seams of your boots. The brown dog follows at once, pretending it is intended to walk this way all along. Above the crooked roofs, smoke rises in thin blue ribbons from hearth holes and chimneys, carrying the smell of damp wood, old ashes, and the first pot stirred awake. You move toward the market square, where a few stalls are beginning to open beneath sagging awnings. The mud remembers every cart that crossed it yesterday. Your knee remembers every mile before that. Somewhere behind you, the monastery bell marks the hour, and its sound spreads over the town like a grey cloth. It is a plain sound, without hurry, yet everyone obeys it a little. A woman pauses in pouring water into a trough. A baker's boy glances toward the abbey tower. Even the dog lifts its head, then decides bells cannot be eaten and lowers it again. Breakfast, if one may call it that with confidence, is not a bright table of abundance. There are no silver platters, no sugared fruits, no heroic roast birds glistening in candlelight. There is coarse bread, a little ale, perhaps yesterday's pottage thinned with water and brought back to life over the fire. If fortune has smiled, there may be cheese hard enough to defend a doorway, or smoked fish with more salt than flesh. It is a meal made for continuation, not celebration. You find the alehouse woman from last night already awake, sleeves rolled, hair tucked beneath a linen coif, stirring a pot over the hearth as if the fate of the town depends upon barley not sticking to the bottom. Perhaps it does. Rushes lie scattered across the floor, damp and trampled near the door, fresher near the hearth where appearances matter. A few beeswax candles stand unlit on a shelf. too dear for common morning use. Tallow will do for most needs, and sunlight, such as it is, may finish the rest. She gives you a wooden bowl without ceremony. The pottage is thin but hot, with peas, leeks, and grains swollen from long simmering. A heel of dark bread sits beside it, dense and slightly sour. You cup the bowl in both hands, letting warmth enter your fingers before you risk the first spoonful. Across from you, the white-patched man tears bread slowly with his back teeth. Beside him, a woman dips her crust into ale to soften it, because her own teeth have become unreliable companions. Here, food is not merely food, it is weather remembered. It is harvest measured, rent paid, tithe taken, grain stored, mice defeated or not defeated, millstones turning, ovens fired, salt bought, barrels sealed. Every bite has passed through a chain of hazards long before it reaches your mouth. A good loaf means the rye survived damp. The miller did not cheat too boldly, the oven did not burn too hot, and the Lord's men did not demand more than expected. A bad loaf may mean none of these things went well, or only that life, as usual, is not asking your permission. You chew carefully, favouring the left side less than yesterday. A gritty fleck catches between your teeth, and you wince. Ground grain often carries tiny stone dust from the mill, and over years it wears teeth down as steadily as water wears a step. The younger apprentices can laugh with full mouths. Older folk chew with strategy. One learns to inspect bread, to soak crusts, to avoid bragging about strong teeth lest God or a neighbour hear and correct the boast. A carter near the hearth lifts his cup of small ale and drinks with the solemn relief of a man greeting an old friend who never asks complicated questions. Ale is safer than much water, or at least people trust it more, and it brings calories along with comfort. Children drink weaker versions. Labourers carry it into fields. Monks brew it. Taverners stretch it. And some swear a warm ale with honey and herbs will ease a winter cough. No one can quite agree whether it is the herbs, the heat, or the ale itself doing the holy work, but few object to repeated trials. You sip yours, it is sour, mild, and cloudy. With a taste like bread had a dream of becoming weather, it settles the stomach. That alone is enough. Near the door, two women discuss the last harvest in low voices. One says the oats came in poor beyond the eastern ridge. The other says a neighbour's barley sprouted in the sheaf before it could be stored, ruined by rain that fell for 9 days without pause. Some swear that if swallows nest low, rain will drown the fields. Others say the swallows know nothing, and it is the moon that should be watched. A third woman, who has survived enough seasons to distrust both birds and moon, says the safest sign of bad weather is a landlord asking cheerfully after your stores. There is a dry laugh at that, quiet and shared. Beyond the alehouse, the market grows louder. You carry your bowl near the doorway and watch as a baker sets loaves on a board beneath a cloth. Dark maslin bread for common hands, a paler wheat loaf for those with coin, flat oat cakes stacked like small shields. A fishwife opens a basket of smoked eels and salted herring, their silver skins dull in morning light. A man with onions strung over his shoulder calls out prices that make several listeners sigh as though personally insulted. At the edge of the square, a toll collector sits beneath a wooden lean-to with a wax tablet and a face made for disappointment. Food moves through gates and hands and rules. Market tolls are paid, measures are checked, at least in theory. Bread is weighed according to a size, though every town has stories of bakers whose loaves grew mysteriously light when flour grew dear. Punishments can be public and humiliating, but hunger itself is the sharper judge. If a baker cheats too often, people remember. If a miller takes too much, people remember even longer. Grain is memory ground fine. You step out into the square, bowl returned, bread heel wrapped in cloth for later. The dog presses its nose hopefully against your hand. You break off the smallest possible crumb, then another, because the first looked too much like an insult. The dog accepts both with the dignity of a bishop receiving tribute. A line has formed near the baker's stall. You watch faces there, young mothers with tired eyes, servants counting coins for households not their own, old men who stand with hands tucked beneath armpits, children staring at loaves as though they are relics of a very practical saint. Hunger season has not fully come, but everyone knows its road. Late winter and early spring can be cruel, when stores run low and fields are not yet giving. Lent, with its fasting rules and fish days, may be pious in intention, yet for poorer folk, abstinence often arrives wearing the same face as necessity. Those with ponds and salted fish endure better. Those with empty barrels learn the taste of patience, nettles, and thin broth. You remember stories from villages beyond the town walls. In bad years, people grind peas, beans, acorns, even bark into meal to stretch bread. Some swear that bread made with certain weeds keeps the belly full longer, though others warn it brings dreams, dizziness, or worse. No one agrees exactly where clever thrift ends and danger begins. The line is often crossed by the hungry before scholars have finished discussing it. A monk from the abbey passes through the square carrying a small basket covered with cloth. Not the suspicious monk from last night, though you glance twice to be sure. This one is round-faced, pink from the cold, and walking with the purposeful calm of a man entrusted with cheese. He pauses at a stall to speak with a fishwife, and the two argue gently over the price of herring for the monastery kitchen. Even monks must bargain. Salvation may be eternal, but smoked fish is priced by the basket. You follow the edge of the square, taking in the winter store of the town's sacks of grain kept in lofts, strings of onions and garlic, barrels of ale, crocks of butter sealed beneath cloth, smoked bacon hanging in shadowed beams, dried beans, peas, apples wrinkled but precious, nuts gathered from hedgerows, cabbages stored in pits against frost. Survival beyond 30 depends on such things, not on one grand feast, but on whether ordinary food lasts through ordinary days. A person may withstand a wound, a fever, a grief, and still be undone by 3 poor harvests in a row. At a stall near the cross, a woman sells little bundles of dried herb sage, hyssop, thyme, pennyroyal, betony. She says sage strengthens the body, hyssop clears the chest, and betony protects against many troubles, including drunkenness, which causes the carter nearby to look away with professional interest. Some swear that carrying fennel seeds in a pouch keeps hunger from gnawing so fiercely. Others chew them simply because they freshen the breath after onions. A miracle both smaller and more easily proven. You buy nothing, but she lets you smell the sage. It is sharp, green, and clean, and for a moment it cuts through the mud, smoke, and animal warmth of the square. She studies you and says, "Past 30. You nod. "Then keep warm food in you when you can," she says, "and do not trust a cough that lingers past Candlemas." It is advice you have heard in different forms from widows, shepherds, monks, and women who know more than they are thanked for. Warmth, food, rest, caution, the holy 4, though no church has carved them above an altar. The morning deepens, and the town's appetite becomes its rhythm. Bread is bought, ale poured, fish wrapped, onions argued over, Coins bitten, baskets lifted. You walk through it slowly, with the dog at your heel and the wrapped bread against your side. You feel how every body here is built from what it managed to eat and what it failed to eat year after year. Strong arms may begin in childhood porridge. Bent backs may begin in hunger. Short tempers may be empty stomachs wearing boots. By the town cross, the suspicious monk appears again, just briefly, speaking to a narrow man with ink stains on his sleeves. The monk passes him something small from beneath his robe. The scribe tucks it into a satchel and walks quickly toward the abbey lane. You catch only a glimpse of folded scrap, perhaps, or a charm, or a recipe for something that tastes terrible enough to be medicine. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The dog notices none of this. Having found a fish scale in the mud that appears to require deep investigation, you smile despite the cold. Then the bell sounds again. The square continues its business, but the tone settles over you like a reminder. Life past 30 is not merely surviving sickness or weather. It is surviving the table as well, the lean bowl, the hard crust, the missing harvest, the sour ale, the careful saving of crumbs, the knowledge that plenty is temporary and hunger has excellent memory. You tuck your bread more safely beneath your cloak and turn toward the narrow lane that leads deeper into town, where the stalls of remedies and relics are beginning to stir beneath painted signs and faded cloth. For now, your belly is warm, not full, perhaps, but persuaded. In this world, persuaded is often enough. You turn from the bread stalls with the taste of thin ale still resting on your tongue, and the market changes around you as though the town has opened a second, stranger mouth. Food gives way to remedies. Practical hunger gives way to hopeful fear. Beneath patched awnings and painted boards, people sell the things a body may reach for when bread, warmth, and sleep are no longer enough. The lane narrows between a cooper's shed and the outer wall of a chapel, where the stone is damp and green at the base. Here the smells come in sharp little gusts: crushed sage, vinegar, sheep fat, dried lavender, hot iron, stale blood from the barber's basin, incense drifting from the chapel door, and something bitter enough to make your tongue retreat before you even know what it is. The brown dog trots beside you, nose working furiously, then sneezes with such force that a woman selling charms tells it God bless you, which seems generous under the circumstances. A painted sign creaks overhead. It shows a man holding a lancet in one hand and a tooth in the other, his painted smile far too cheerful for both occupations. Beneath it, a barber surgeon is arranging his tools on a cloth razors, small knives, cupping glasses, linen strips, a basin, a bowl for leeches, and pincers that make several passers-by reconsider the strength of their teeth. His sleeves are rolled, and his arms are bare despite the cold. He has the calm manner of a man who has heard every kind of groan and judges them all by volume and payment. You pause at a distance that feels respectful and safe. A farmer stands before him with a swollen thumb wrapped in dirty cloth. The barber unwraps it, squints, and mutters that it wants draining. The farmer looks as if he would rather negotiate with wolves. Beside them, an older woman says loudly that a poultice of bread, milk, and ground flax would do better if men had patience. The barber replies that patience is excellent for saints, less so for pus. No one quite knows whether to laugh, so the market does what markets do best. It pretends not to listen while listening entirely. You move on before the thumb becomes any more educational. At the next stall, bunches of herbs hang from a wooden frame like little sleeping birds. Betony, rue, mugwort, sage, fennel, yarrow, comfrey, wormwood, horehound. Some leaves are tied with coloured thread. Others are crushed into powders kept in horn containers and tiny linen packets. The woman selling them has eyes as bright as wet stones and hands stained green at the fingertips. She looks at you the way a careful cook looks at a pot, assessing what may be wrong before it boils over. For the joint, she asks. You glance down at your knee, which apparently has been speaking to strangers. For the road, you say. That is what knees say when they want pity. She lifts a little bundle of dried betony and holds it near your face. Its scent is faint, dusty, and medicinal. Not unpleasant, but not eager to please. She tells you betony is good against headaches, bad dreams, weak stomach, drunkenness, sorcery, and the sort of sadness that settles behind the ribs after too much rain. Some swear it can protect a house if tucked beneath the threshold. Others say it only protects the seller's purse. Even now. It is hard to tell whether a herb gains its reputation through healing, hope, or the impressive confidence of the person tying the string. Still, you listen. Everyone listens. A body past 30 becomes a little library of concerns, a stiffness here, a cough there, a tooth that complains at cold ale, a stomach that no longer accepts every bargain offered by the world. You may not buy every remedy, but you learn their names, because names are a comfort. They give shape to what aches in the dark. The herb woman shows you comfrey for bruises, yarrow for bleeding, horehound for the chest, and rue for protection, though she warns that too much rue is no friend to anyone. She keeps a small charm sewn with 3 knots and a tiny scrap of parchment. For fever, she says, written under the right moon. No one can quite agree whether the moon improves ink, but the parchment is folded neatly, and neatness itself can look like power. Across the lane, a relic seller has spread a cloth beneath a little shrine-shaped box. He wears a pilgrim badge on his cap, and a cloak patched with bits of cloth from places he may or may not have visited. On the cloth lie tiny vials, bits of bone, splinters of wood, scraps of cloth, and little lead tokens stamped with saints whose faces have been reduced by wear into holy smudges. He speaks softly to a young woman holding a sick child against her shoulder. This, he says, lifting a vial no larger than a fingernail, has touched the shrine of Saint Apollonia, gentle helper of teeth. The child is too young to care, but every adult nearby thinks immediately of their own mouths. A man behind you mutters that last month the same seller had 3 splinters from the true cross, all different colours. Another says holiness has many shades. The seller ignores them with the serene patience of one who has practised ignoring doubt as a trade. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether relics heal by grace, suggestion, or the simple kindness of giving frightened people something to hold. Yet in a world where fever may carry off a neighbour between one bell and the next, you understand why a mother might press a tiny vial to a child's cheek and whisper a saint's name into the cold air. You step closer to a scribe's table set under the chapel wall. The narrow man with ink-stained sleeves from the square sits there now, trimming a quill with a small knife. Before him are charms, prayers, contracts, love letters, legal petitions, and little folded protections against misfortune. His fingers are blackened near the nails. A portable inkhorn hangs from his belt. He does not look up until the suspicious monk appears from the shadow of the chapel door and places one hand flat on the table. The two speak quietly. You cannot catch the words, only see the monk slide something wrapped in linen toward him. The scribe touches it with 2 fingers, as one might touch either a relic or a dead mouse, then tucks it into a wooden box beneath the table. The dog sits beside your boot and watches this transaction with the deep concern of an animal hoping the linen contains sausage. The scribe notices your gaze and gives you a thin smile. Need a prayer written. Against what? He dips his quill. That is usually the difficulty. A fair answer. Against toothache, fever, hunger, wolves, bad weather, bad debts, childbirth, sudden lameness, sour ale, dishonest measures, and neighbours with excellent memories, against the simple wearing down of the body by days. A written prayer may not change all that, but tucked into a pouch, sewn inside a cloak, laid beneath a pillow, it lets a person feel less bare before the world. You thank him and move on. The barber surgeon's stall has drawn a larger crowd now. A boy sits on a stool, pale but proud, while the barber prepares to cup his back for a stubborn cough. The cupping glasses are warmed, pressed against the skin, and left to pull dark circles to the surface. Some swear this draws illness outward. Others say it draws only bruises and payment. No one can quite agree, but the boy's mother watches with fierce hope, and hope is not easily argued out of a mother. Nearby, a tooth drawer has begun boasting that he can pull a bad tooth before a man finishes reciting the Lord's Prayer. An older carter replies that this depends very much on how frightened the man is and how quickly he prays. That earns a quiet chuckle from the crowd. Even the barber smiles without showing his own teeth, perhaps wisely. You feel the small ache in your jaw again and keep walking. There are amulets against plague, though no plague has come this season. There are beads blessed by monks, little wax images of saints, dried toad skins said to draw poison, and rings engraved with words no one present can read, but everyone agrees look ancient enough to matter. One stall offers powdered mummy, or claims to. Another sells vinegar mixed with herbs to ward off foul air. The seller insists bad smells carry sickness into the body, and while scholars may quarrel over reasons, everyone in the lane nods at the idea that foul air should be avoided. In this town, that is less a medical theory than an ambitious lifestyle. A woman bends over a basket of leeches kept in water. They twist slowly, black and shining. She taps the bowl with one fingernail and says they are lively, as if praising puppies. Leeches are used for drawing blood, balancing humours, easing swellings. Too much blood, too much heat, too much phlegm. Too much black bile bodies are imagined as small weather systems, always needing adjustment. You have known people bled for fever, purged for melancholy, sweated for chills, and given herbs so bitter that the illness may have fled simply from politeness. Past 30, you have learned that treatment can be almost as frightening as disease. Yet you have also learned that people are not fools for seeking it. They are frightened, sore, tired, and unwilling to surrender. They reach for what is at hand: a herb bundle, a relic, a lancet, a saint's name, a bowl of broth, a neighbour's advice, a charm tied in red thread. Survival is a patchwork cloak, and not every patch is woven from certainty. The chapel bell rings softly above you, a smaller sound than the monastery bell, but close enough to tremble in your chest. People cross themselves. The relic seller lowers his voice. The herb woman covers her packets against a sudden spit of rain. The barber wipes his blade on a cloth and looks toward the sky as if weather itself may be a patient arriving late. You pull your cloak tighter. A fine drizzle begins, silvering the market boards, darkening the shoulders of coats and hoods. The dog shakes itself before it is wet enough to justify the gesture. You suspect this is more personal expression than necessity. At the edge of the remedy lane, a small group has gathered around an old woman seated on a stool. She's not selling much that can be seen a few cords, a bowl of pins, a bundle of wool, and a pouch of salt. Yet people lean toward her as though warmth comes from her words. She ties knots while murmuring over them. One knot for pain to lessen, one for fever to loosen, one for sleep to return. Some swear she learned the charm from a nun. Others say from a shepherd who slept in a ruined Roman tower and heard saints under the stones. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and perhaps that is part of why the charm works. A clear story is useful, but a mysterious one travels farther. She looks up as you pass. "You have road cold in your bones," she says. You pause. "Most do," she adds, which somewhat lessens the miracle. Still, she presses a pinch of salt into your palm and tells you to drop it in the hearth before sleeping, for luck and for keeping ill dreams from settling. You do not know whether you believe her. Belief may be too large a word, but you close your fingers over the salt anyway. The rain grows steadier. Stalls pull their cloths lower. The market becomes a blur of hoods, steam, wet wood, and muted voices. You stand beneath the chapel eaves with your bread tucked beneath your cloak, the salt in your hand, the dog leaning against your boot, and all around you the town bargaining with frailty. Here is the truth written plainly in herb smoke and candle wax: the body is never guaranteed. It must be tended, soothed, patched, warmed, blessed, bled, fed, and sometimes simply comforted while time does what time has always done. You are past 30, and so you know enough to be wary of promises. But you also know enough not to mock small comforts. A charm may not mend a cracked tooth, a relic may not cool a fever, a herb may fail, a barber may hurt more than he helps. Yet the hand that offers remedy is still a hand reaching toward life, and in this damp, dangerous, candle-lit world, that reaching is no small thing. The monastery bell sounds through the rain, calling the hours onward. You turn toward its voice, because the lane ahead leads toward the abbey gate and the infirmary beyond, where sickness is not sold, cures beneath awnings, but laid quietly on pallets under the care of monks, prayers, and whatever knowledge the age can gather. The suspicious monk has vanished again. The scribe's box is shut. The dog sniffs the wet ground and follows as you step from the market's remedies into the deeper, colder breath of the town. The rain follows you toward the abbey like a quiet, persistent thought. It beads along the edge of your hood, darkens the wool across your shoulders, and turns the lane into a narrow ribbon of mud shining under the grey morning light. The dog comes with you, though with clear resentment toward the weather, stepping around puddles until one unavoidable splash persuades it that dignity is a fragile earthly possession. Ahead, the monastery wall rises beyond the last crooked houses of the town. It is not as grand as a king's fortress, but it has its own solemn strength. Pale stone darkened by damp, a pointed gate, a bell tower lifting into mist, and narrow windows that seem to watch the world without being especially impressed by it. Beyond those walls, men in wool habits keep the hours with prayers, ink, work, silence, and occasional arguments about fish. To the townsfolk, the abbey is many things at once: holy shelter, landlord, employer, healer, storehouse, school, and a place where bells tell you that time belongs first to God and only afterward to your aching feet. You reach the gate just as another bell sounds, fuller now, rolling over the wet roofs behind you. A lay brother opens a smaller wicket door set into the larger oak gate. He is broad-faced, sleepy-eyed, and carrying a broom, as if he has been defending civilization against wet rushes since before dawn. He looks at you, then at the dog. "Guest house," he asks. "Infirmary," you say, only to look in, if they allow it. He studies your face, perhaps measuring whether you're ill enough to be troublesome or healthy enough to be useful. In the end, he lets you through with a nod. The dog attempts to follow and is stopped by the broom laid gently across its chest. No dogs in the infirmary. The dog stares at him with deep theological disappointment. You leave it beneath the outer arch, where it settles on dry stones and sighs as though betrayed by every counsel of the church. Inside, the abbey court is quieter than the town, but not silent. Monks move between buildings with their hoods up against the rain. A novice crosses the yard carrying 2 buckets that seem determined to pull his arms from their sockets. Somewhere a hammer taps in a workshop. From the bakehouse comes warm air, yeast, and the faint, blessed smell of loaves. You pass a covered walkway where rain drips steadily from the tiles, and the lay brother leads you toward a low building set apart from the main cloister. The infirmary smells different from the market's remedy lane. Less sharp, more enclosed. Beeswax, boiled linen, damp wool, herbs hung to dry, old straw, vinegar, smoke from a small brazier, and beneath all of it the human smell of fever sour, warm and helpless. Light enters through narrow windows, falling in pale strips across pallets arranged along the wall. Some are empty. Some hold men wrapped in blankets, their faces turned toward the dimness. One woman from the town lies near the hearth with her hair tucked beneath a cloth. Perhaps the abbey has taken her in because there is no room at home, or because someone has paid, or because mercy and practicality sometimes share a bed. A monk bends over a man whose cheeks are flushed and eyes bright with fever. He places a cool cloth on the man's forehead, then murmurs a prayer so softly that it becomes part of the room's breathing. At a small table, another monk grinds something in a mortar with slow, patient turns of the wrist. His sleeves are rolled back. His fingers are stained yellow-brown from herbs, ink, and perhaps years of handling everything from parchment to poultices. This is where bodies are brought when ordinary tricks fail, when the hearth charm has not cooled the child, when the neighbour's broth has not strengthened the old man, when the wound has reddened, when the cough has deepened, when the family has run out of sleep. Here, illness is given a pallet, a candle, a cup of warmed drink, and a name if anyone can decide upon one. No one can quite agree whether a fever is an enemy, a cleansing fire, a punishment, a test, an imbalance, or simply bad air that found its way inside. In truth, people may believe several of these before breakfast. The monk at the table tells you that the man by the wall has been given a drink of willow bark and honey for pain, though not too much, for the stomach must not be offended. Offending the stomach is a medieval medical concern of considerable seriousness, partly because the stomach, like a small lord, can retaliate against the entire household. You stand out of the way as a younger brother carries in a basin of warm water. The old woman from the remedy lane would approve of the smell rising from it: sage, hyssop, and something bitter. Linen cloth soak there before being wrung out and folded over a patient's chest. A row of clay jars sits on a shelf, each marked with careful little labels in a hand so neat it seems nearly holy. There are salves for sores, syrups for coughs, powders for purging, oils for rubbing stiff limbs, dried flowers in packets, and a small covered bowl that you suspect contains leeches. You do not check. A person can respect medicine without inspecting all of its enthusiasm. Near the hearth, a brother is bleeding a man from the arm into a shallow bowl. The patient looks resigned, which may be courage or simply fatigue. The monk watches the flow carefully, then binds the arm with clean linen. The belief is that the humours must be balanced, excess drawn away, the inner weather corrected. Some swear a well-timed bleeding saves lives. Others mutter that it leaves a weak man weaker. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the cure helps, harms, or merely gives everyone something to do while waiting for God and the body to negotiate. A bell rings again, closer this time, and every monk in the room pauses, not fully. Hands remain where they are, cloths held, spoons steadied, bandages half-tied, but the sound enters them like a command remembered in bone. One brother whispers the opening of a prayer. Another crosses himself over a sleeping patient. In the Middle Ages, time does not simply pass. It is rung, chanted, divided, offered. The sick hear the hours even when they do not know their own names. You move beside a pallet where a man of perhaps 35 lies with one leg propped beneath blankets. He might once have been broad and merry. Now his face is pale with effort. A cart crushed his foot. The lay brother tells you quietly, not enough to kill him at once, enough to make every future day uncertain. Infection is the shadow that waits beside any wound. A broken bone, a torn hand, a bite from a pig. A splinter that goes deep beneath the nail, small openings through which death may enter wearing no armour at all. On the table near him rests a little wooden cross, a cup of ale warmed with herbs, and a strip of parchment folded and tied with thread. A charm, perhaps, or a prayer written by the ink-stained scribe from the market. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether written words heal because saints read them, because demons fear them, or because frightened hearts rest more easily when something has been done. The man notices you looking and gives a faint smile. "If I rise," he says, "I shall never curse my boots again." "That seems unlikely," the lay brother murmurs. The man's smile widens by the smallest measure. Even here, in the fever room, humour survives like a coal under ash. At the far end of the infirmary, you see the suspicious monk at last. He stands before a cupboard with the ink-stained scribe beside him, both speaking in low voices to the infirmerer, an older monk with a face carved by patience. The linen pouch from yesterday rests on the table between them. The infirmerer unwraps it carefully. Inside lies not gold, nor cheese, to the dog's probable disappointment beyond the gate, but a dark, shriveled root bound with thread and sealed with a scrap of wax. Mandrake the scribe whispers. The older monk frowns. Some swear mandrake roots scream when pulled from the earth and that the cry kills anyone foolish enough to hear it. Others insist this is a tale told by sellers to raise the price. No one can quite agree, but everyone in the room looks at the root as though it might have opinions. The infirmerer covers it again and says only that strong things require careful hands. You feel a chill not from rain. In a world short on certainty, power gathers around odd objects, roots shaped like limbs, bones said to be saints, oils blessed on distant altars, stones from holy wells, scraps of writing folded too small to read. Some comfort, some deceive, some may truly help in ways no one yet understands. The line between medicine, prayer, and wonder is not a wall here. It is more like mist over a field at dawn, and people walk through it because the road lies on the other side. A novice brings broth to the woman near the hearth. She drinks slowly from a wooden spoon, eyes closed. The broth is thin but warm, perhaps chicken if the abbey stores are kind, perhaps only herbs and barley pretending toward generosity. Warmth matters, clean linen matters, rest matters. In a peasant cottage, the sick may lie beside children, smoke, animals, and work that cannot stop. here, at least for a little while. Someone watches the fevered through the hours. Someone changes straw. Someone washes cloths. Someone prays when the patient has no strength left to do it. That, too, is a remedy. You remain by the door, feeling the weight of all this quiet effort. Surviving beyond 30 is not only a matter of strength. Strength can fail in a week. It is not only luck, though luck walks everywhere in this place, slipping through doors uninvited. It is also care rough, limited, imperfect care. A neighbour carrying you to the abbey, a monk cooling your brow, a wife saving a candle for the worst night, a brother grinding herbs until his wrist aches, a prayer spoken because silence would feel too empty. The rain eases outside. Through the narrow window, the courtyard shines with wet stone. The bell's last vibration fades into the rafters. The infirmary settles back into its low music breath. Cough, spoon against cup, mortar against pestle. The soft scrape of sandals on floor rushes. You breathe in beeswax and boiled linen and bitter herbs, and you understand why people fear this room and seek it all the same. When you step back into the courtyard, the dog is waiting exactly where you left it, though it behaves as if it has survived exile, hunger, and probably martyrdom. It rises, shakes rain from its ears, and falls in beside you, behind you. The infirmary door closes softly. Ahead, beyond the abbey wall and the town's damp lanes, fields and workshops wait, full of backs bent by labour and hands hardened by years. The day has not finished teaching what 30 winters can do to a body. You pull your cloak close, salt still tucked in your pouch, bread beneath your arm, and follow the path toward the working edge of town. You leave the abbey by the smaller gate, and the town's quiet holiness gives way almost at once to the thick, patient noise of work. The rain has thinned into mist, but the world remains wet enough to shine. Water clings to the stones, hangs in the thatch, beads along your cloak, and gathers at the edges of the ruts where cartwheels have written their long, muddy scripture. The dog trots ahead, refreshed by its own sense of purpose, though the purpose appears to involve smelling every post. Puddle and suspicious cabbage leaf between the abbey wall and the fields. Beyond the last houses, the land opens. Strips of winter field lie stretched beneath the grey sky, some dark and turned, some stubbled, some waiting under frost's faint silver. Hedgerows divide holdings with thorn, hazel, and old habits. A few crows step through the furrows with the solemn air of monks inspecting poor Latin. Farther out, figures move slowly, bent beneath tools and weather. From a distance, labourers in the fields seem almost peaceful, like dark stitches drawn across brown cloth. Up close, the peace becomes breath, mud, effort, and the steady complaint of bodies asked to do too much for too many years. You follow a narrow track between fields where water sucks at your boots. The old knee has become thoughtful again. It does not quite hurt, not sharply, but it remembers. You pass a man driving oxen before a heavy plough, his hands wrapped around the wooden handles, shoulders hunched against the cold. The animals move with slow, enormous patience, their breath smoking in the air. The ploughshare cuts the earth, turning wet soil in dark folds. Each pass is labour for beasts and man alike. The man's tunic is patched at the elbows, his cap pulled low, his beard silvered not delicately but in hard, weather-bitten clumps. He may be 40, he may be 32 and simply well acquainted with hardship. In this place, age is not always a number. Sometimes it is a posture. He nods as you pass, and you pause near the edge of the strip. "Road's bad," he asks. "Road is doing its best to become a pond. That is its usual ambition." His mouth twitches, but his hands do not leave the plough. Work allows little ceremony. He leans again into the handles, boots sinking, and the oxen pull. His back bends, straightens, bends again. Every ridge of movement looks familiar, as if repeated so often that his bones know it better than his thoughts do. There are calluses inside his calluses, old cracks across the knuckles, a scar along one wrist, and fingers thickened from years of gripping wood in cold weather. You imagine waking with such hands at dawn, trying to close them around a cup, waiting for feeling to return. Some swear rubbing joints with warmed sheep fat and crushed nettle keep stiffness away. Others wrap the hands in wool soaked with vinegar, or sleep with warmed stones near the feet. No one can quite agree what truly helps, but every cottage has its method, and every method has someone old enough to defend it fiercely. The track leads past a ditch where two women are gathering deadwood and fallen branches, their skirts tucked up above the mud. One carries a bundle on her back with a strap across her forehead, the weight pulling her forward. The other uses a hooked stick to drag a branch from the hedge. They talk as they work, not because the work is light, but because silence makes weight heavier. Their laughter comes low and brief when the branch resists as if it has taken monastic vows. One of them straightens and presses a fist into her lower back. For a moment her face tightens. Then she breathes out, spits into the mud, and bends again. This is how years gather, not always through great battles or terrible accidents, though those come often enough. Years gather through carrying water, lifting firewood, grinding grain, turning hay, kneading dough, hauling sacks, drawing buckets from wells, standing in smoke, stooping over rows of beans, chasing pigs from gardens, washing linen in cold streams, and rising before dawn because the day has no interest in whether your hips ache. Work does not merely fill a life here, it shapes the body that must live it. You walk on toward a cluster of workshops near the stream, where the town's edge becomes a low murmur of tools. A watermill stands beside the bank, its wheel turning with slow authority. The building trembles faintly with the grinding of stones within. Grain goes in as kernels and comes out as flour, though not without toll. The miller, broad and flour-dusted, stands in the doorway looking like a ghost who has chosen a practical trade. His eyebrows are white with meal. So is his beard. So are his boots. Even the dog gives him a careful sniff and sneezes, perhaps deciding that a man made of flour is too holy or too confusing to judge. Inside the mill, the air is thick. Dust floats in pale shafts of light, settling in hair, nose, throat, and lungs. The stones rumble. Sacks lie stacked along the wall. A boy carries a half-filled measure with both arms, face tight with concentration. The miller's wife sits near the door mending a torn sack with coarse thread, her hands moving swiftly despite fingers bent at the joints. She tells you that flour dust makes men cough in winter and sweat in summer, but bread does not grind itself. This is said not as complaint, but as one of those plain truths that has outlived argument. Some swear millers are always cheats. Those who say so often still bring grain to the mill because suspicion is strong, but hunger is stronger. The miller, hearing this old accusation muttered by a farmer outside, replies that if he stole half as much as people claimed, he would be fat as an abbot's Christmas goose. He is not, which seems a reasonable defence, though not a complete one. From the mill you follow the stream toward the smithy. You hear it before you reach it, the hammers ring steady and bright, striking sparks from the damp day. The smith's shed glows orange within, a little furnace of human stubbornness against cold. Horseshoes hang from beams, iron bars lean in a corner, a cracked grindstone waits by the wall. The smith stands at the anvil with sleeves rolled above forearms roped in muscle, though one shoulder sits higher than the other from years of striking. His apprentice pumps the bellows, cheeks red, eyes watering from smoke. Heat hits your face as you step near the doorway. It is welcome for a breath, then nearly too much. The smith lifts a piece of iron from the coals, lays it across the anvil, and hammers it flat with blows that seem to ring in your teeth. Firelight reveals burns old and new along his hands. His beard is singed short on one side. No bard, you suspect, has written enough songs about the quiet courage required to keep one's beard near fire every day. Perhaps the rhyme has proved difficult. He pauses to quench the iron. Steam hisses up, filling the shed with a sharp metallic smell. Past 30, he asks, because apparently the entire town has agreed your age is public property. Past 30, you say. He nods toward his own shoulder. Then you know. The body becomes a chest with too many iron hinges, all of them rust. A useful image, though not a comforting one. He tells you he sleeps sometimes with a strip of hareskin tied around his upper arm to keep pain from settling in the shoulder. His mother swore by it. His wife says it works only because he believes his mother more than he believes sense. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether hareskin draws pain away, but the smith keeps the strip all the same. People may mock a charm in daylight and tie it on before bed. You leave the smithy with warmth still on your cheeks and the hammer's rhythm following you down the lane. Past the stream, men are repairing a cart whose wheel broke in yesterday's mud. One kneels with a mallet, another holds the rim steady. The broken cartwheel gives a small pang of recognition, a callback written in wood and inconvenience. Perhaps every road has one waiting. Perhaps wheels break because carts, like people, are only expected to hold together until they do not. A carpenter nearby planes oak planks beneath a lean-to, his arms moving in long, smooth strokes. Curled shavings fall around his feet like pale ribbons. The smell of fresh wood rises clean and sweet through the damp. His left hand is missing part of 2 fingers. He uses the rest with such skill that your eyes adjust only after a moment. He catches you looking and smiles. "Door bit me," he says. "Did you bite back?" "Too seasoned." There is your second lesson of the working edge injury is common enough to be folded into jokes. A missing finger, a limp, a scar, a clouded eye, a cough that stays after winter, a back bent from years of carrying loads. These are not rare tragedies displayed under glass. They are part of the town's ordinary inventory. People notice, remember, adjust. The carpenter ties his tools differently. The ploughman wraps his knee. The miller coughs and keeps grinding. The women carry wood and stop for breath only when the hedge allows it. The monastery bell sounds behind you, softened by mist. Midday approaches. Workers pause briefly where they can. A woman unwraps coarse bread and cheese from a cloth. A boy drinks small ale from a leather bottle. The ploughman leans against the ox yoke, eyes closed for 3 slow breaths. No one calls it rest in the grand sense. It is only a pause placed between one demand and the next. The dog receives a rind of cheese from the carpenter and immediately decides this workshop is the moral centre of civilization. You sit on a low stone near the stream and eat a piece of your saved bread. It is chewy, gritty, and dearer than it looks. Around you, the whole world seems to be wearing itself down in order to continue stones grinding grain, blades biting wood, iron bending under hammer, hands pulling life from cold ground. To survive beyond 30 is to have been used by work and not yet broken by it. It is to know that strength is not an endless spring but a candle, and every task takes a little wax. Yet there is dignity here, quiet and unadorned. Not the polished dignity of tapestries and heraldry, but the stubborn grace of people who repair the wheel, stir the pot, bind the knee, sharpen the blade, and rise again before the bell. You look at the carpenter's missing fingers, the smith's high shoulder, the wood-gatherer's bent back, the ploughman's wrapped knee, and you see not failure but record. The body remembers labour because labour built the day. Mist drifts low over the fields. Smoke rises from cottages. Somewhere a child calls after a runaway hen with the despair of a tiny magistrate. The dog finishes its rind and looks at you as though asking why more carpenters have not been arranged along the road. You stand, brushing crumbs from your tunic. Ahead, the lane turns back toward the houses clustered near the hearth fires, where women work in rooms thick with steam, smoke, wool, children, gossip, brewing, mending, and risks of their own. The lessons of the fields and workshops remain in your shoulders as you walk. Behind you, the hammer rings once more. Before you, the smell of hearth smoke deepens. Between them, your own body moves carefully, carrying 30 winters and the knowledge that every ordinary task leaves its mark. You follow the smoke back toward the clustered houses, where the lane narrows and the world draws inward again. The fields behind you lie under mist. The smith's hammer fades into a distant ringing, and the stream's cold chatter is replaced by the softer, busier sounds of hearth-life pots being stirred, cloth being slapped against tubs, children being corrected, stools scraping over floors, and someone somewhere telling a hen that it is not welcome indoors. An argument the hen appears prepared to continue. You duck beneath a low lintel into a house where heat meets you in a damp wave. The room is dim, close, and crowded with work. Rushes cover the packed floor, mixed with dried lavender and whatever the last pair of muddy boots has contributed. Smoke curls beneath the soot-black rafters before wandering toward the roof hole with no particular urgency. A pot hangs over the fire, giving off the warm, plain smell of leeks, peas, and a bone that has been asked to flavour more than one meal. Wool stockings steam near the hearth. A cradle rocks under the push of one tired foot. A girl cards wool by the door where the light is best. A woman with rolled sleeves kneads dough on a board, her hands white with flour and her forearms strong as bundled rope. This is not rest, though it is indoors. Medieval houses are full of the kind of work that hides inside warmth, and is therefore often mistaken for comfort by people who do not have to do it. Here, survival beyond 30 wears a linen coif, keeps one eye on the fire, one ear on the baby, one hand in the dough, and the other somehow finding time to scold a child away from the ale vat. The woman kneading dough glances at you. She's perhaps in her late 30s, perhaps older, perhaps younger and weathered by smoke, childbirth, and bargaining over barley. Her face has fine lines at the eyes, not delicate lines but useful ones, made by squinting into hearthlight and watching weather come over fields. "You've come from the workmen," she says. Their backs send greetings. Then their wives may send them back again once the mending is done. She presses her palms into the dough with a rhythm older than bells. Nearby, another woman sits on a stool with the distaff tucked beneath one arm, drawing fibres and twisting thread. Her fingers move so steadily they seem to belong to the spindle more than to her. At her feet, the brown dog has settled in a patch of warmth, having correctly judged that houses with women and crumbs are superior to roads with puddles and theology. You stand near the wall, not wanting to be in the way, though in a room like this the way is everywhere. A small boy carries an armful of kindling, drops half of it, and looks around as if gravity has acted suspiciously. The older woman with the spindle tells him to pick it up before the fire grows cold and the saints become disappointed. The boy obeys, though he does glance upward, perhaps checking for disappointed saints among the rafters. A midwife enters through the back door without knocking, shaking drizzle from her cloak. Everyone makes room without appearing to make room. She is broad-hipped, sharp-eyed, and carries a leather satchel polished by years of use. Her hair is tucked beneath a dark veil, and around her neck hangs a little pouch of herbs, a bone-handled knife, and a small string of beads. People know her name before they know the Reeves. Babies arrive more reliably than justice. She warms her hands at the hearth and asks after a woman in the next lane whose time is near. The dough kneader answers in a low voice. You listen without seeming to listen, which is another skill past 30 teaches. Childbirth hangs in the room like an unseen beam holding up the roof. It is ordinary, holy, dangerous, and discussed with the practical calm of people who cannot afford to faint at the thought. Women survive it. Women do not. Children survive it. Children do not. No one can quite agree whether tying a birthing girdle blessed at a shrine truly eases labour, but many women ask for one, and few midwives mock them. A scrap of saintly cloth, a whispered prayer, warm water, clean linen if available, strong hands, and luck, these are the tools laid against fear. The midwife opens her satchel. You glimpse folded linen, a little jar of grease, dried raspberry leaves, pennyroyal kept carefully apart, a spool of thread, and a small smooth stone said to help labouring women grip through pain. Some swear the stone came from a holy well. Others say it came from the river and became holy through repeated usefulness. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, perhaps because the difference matters less when a woman needs something solid in her palm. At the table, a younger woman with a baby at her breast shifts and winces. She cannot be more than 20, yet there is a shadowed weariness around her eyes that makes her look older than some widows. The baby suckles noisily, very serious about its work. An older woman sets a cup of warm ale with honey beside her and tells her to drink before she goes hollow. Milk, blood, sleep, food, warmth, all must be spent, all must be restored. The body is a household account, and many women here are asked to keep it balanced while everyone else borrows from it. You think of the market and its remedies, the infirmary and its pallets. Women often reach those places late, after tending everyone else first. A fever in a husband is urgent. A cough in a child is urgent. A pain in the woman stirring the pot may be folded away until the bread is baked, the linen washed, the ale strained, the baby soothed, the hens shut in, the old father fed, and the fire banked for night. By then pain has learned patience too. Yet there is strength here that does not look like the smith's hammer or the ploughman's shoulders. It moves in networks, in whispers at wells, in borrowed pots, in shared yeast, in warnings about a man with a quick temper, in a widow quietly teaching a girl which herbs settle bleeding and which must be treated with care. It is the strength of knowing who has extra wool, who keeps clean rushes, who can sit with the sick child, who brews ale strong enough to sell, who waters it too boldly, and who can be trusted when labour begins after midnight. The woman at the hearth lifts a cloth from a shallow tub, twists it hard, and lays it near the fire. Her knuckles are red from cold water. Washing is heavy work, and the steam rising from the linen smells of ash lye and damp cloth. Some swear washing baby clothes on certain unlucky days invites mischief from wandering spirits. Others say dirty linen invites trouble more efficiently, even now. It is hard to tell whether caution becomes superstition, or superstition becomes a way of organizing fear. But the older women remember the days anyway. A widow enters next, carrying a small jug of ale for sale. She is narrow, straight-backed, and wrapped in a patched mantle. Widowhood here can mean vulnerability, but it can also mean a certain stern freedom, depending on land, children, guild rights, neighbours, and luck. She brews well, the dough-kneader says, and measures fairly, which is more than can be said for some men with larger signs over their doors. Alewives keep households alive with grain, yeast, timing, and reputation. If the brew goes sour, everyone knows. If it is strong, everyone knows faster. The widow pours a little into a cup for tasting. The midwife drinks, nods, and declares it honest. This appears to settle the matter with more authority than any court. The dog rises hopefully, then lowers itself again when no ale is offered. Medieval disappointment has many forms. Near the hearth, conversation turns to age. One woman says her mother lived past 50 because she never drank cold water in winter. Another says her aunt lived longer because she quarrelled daily and frightened death from the doorway. A third says death is not so easily frightened, but husbands sometimes are, which wins the softest ripple of laughter. No one fully agrees on what makes a woman old, only that the signs arrive in pieces the last child weaned. The hair hidden thinner beneath the veil, the monthly blood gone quiet, the joints swelling in rain, the young women asking advice with fear tucked under their tongues. Past 30, a woman may be seen as seasoned, valuable, dangerous, burdensome, wise, or all of these before dinner. She may be mother, widow, worker, healer, gossip, brewer, keeper of keys, keeper of grudges, keeper of recipes, keeper of memory. She may know where the best rushes grow, how long to boil cloth after sickness, when a fever is turning, which saint to invoke for a difficult birth, and which neighbour's apology is worth less than spilled whey. You sit at last on a low stool near the wall while the room moves around you. The dough is covered to rise. The baby sleeps, milk-drunk and soft-faced. The midwife ties her satchel again. The widow counts coins by touch. The older spinner draws thread as evenly as breath. The young boy succeeds in stacking the kindling and looks surprised that competence has occurred. The hearth glows red beneath the pot, and for a moment the house feels like the centre of the world, not grand, not safe exactly, but held together by hands that do not stop. Outside, bells mark another hour. Inside, women measure survival in loaves, births, wash water, wool thread, ale strength, shared warnings, and the stubborn art of beginning again even when the body has already given more than it was promised. When you rise to leave, the dough-kneader presses a small heel of bread into your hand, saying it is too hard for the children and therefore perfect for travellers, which is kindness wearing a practical hat. The dog rises too, fully prepared to assist with the burden. You thank her, tuck the bread away, and step back into the damp lane. Behind you, the house resumes its murmur. Ahead, the road leads toward the manor court, where voices will be weighed differently, where fines and rights and reputations gather under a lord's roof. But the warmth of the hearth follows you for several steps, along with the smell of rising dough, wet wool, and wood smoke, and you carry with you the knowledge that many lives past 30 are not merely survived in fields or infirmaries, but held together beside fires like this one. by women whose names may never be written down and whose work is everywhere. The lane from the hearth house leads you beneath dripping eaves and past shuttered windows, where the day has settled into that damp middle hour when neither morning nor afternoon feels willing to take responsibility. Your cloak holds the smell of the women's fire for a little while, warm bread and smoke and wet wool mingled together. But the cold soon begins nibbling at the edges again. The brown dog walks close to your boot, occasionally glancing up with the meaningful patience of a creature who knows you have been given bread and is waiting for justice to reveal itself. Ahead, the manor hall rises at the town's edge, not a castle exactly, though it would like you to notice the thickness of its door. It is built of stone on the lower floor and dark timber above, with a steep roof slick from rain and a yard pressed hard by carts, hooves, and the boots of those who owe someone something. Nearly everyone does, in one fashion or another. A wooden porch shelters the entrance, and beneath it stand men and women in cloaks, hoods, patched mantles, and the long expressions of people prepared to be disappointed by authority. You join them beneath the porch. Rain clicks from the roof edge into a barrel. Someone smells of onions. Someone else smells of sheep. A man beside you carries a hen tucked under one arm, its head poking from his cloak with the offended dignity of a minor noble. Perhaps it is evidence, perhaps payment, perhaps merely company. In a manor court, all three possibilities feel equally likely. Inside, the hall is wide, smoky, and chill despite the hearth. Rushes cover the floor, darker where damp feet have trampled them. At the far end stands a raised table, where the steward sits with a clerk at his side. The steward has a narrow beard, a fur-lined collar, and the polished calm of a man who does not personally lift heavy things, but knows exactly what they are worth. The clerk is younger, ink-stained, and hunched over parchment with a quill ready. Not the same scribe from the market, though there is something familiar in the way all scribes seem partly made of patience, suspicion, and blackened fingertips. The court begins not with drama, but with names. Names are called. Men step forward. Women step forward. Disputes are unfolded like damp cloth. A missing rent. A broken fence. A borrowed ox not returned in the condition expected of a Christian animal. A widow's right to hold her husband's strip of land until her son comes of age. A fine for brewing ale outside the proper measure. A complaint about pigs rooting where pigs have been told, perhaps repeatedly, not to root. You stand near the wall, listening. The dog has not been allowed inside and remains at the door, looking in whenever it opens, deeply concerned that law appears to involve no sausages. For older folk, this room can be shelter or trap. Surviving beyond 30 means little if the land beneath your feet is taken, if your children quarrel, if debts multiply, if a lord's dues arrive before your grain is threshed, if your name is spoken poorly in the hearing of those who write things down. In a world where memory matters, parchment matters even more. A line of ink may preserve a right, demand a payment, or turn a neighbour's complaint into a burden that follows you longer than mud. The first case you hear concerns an old man named Osric, though half the hall calls him Oz, and the clerk asks 3 times which name should be written. No one can quite agree whether a man becomes more himself or less himself when a clerk chooses one spelling for him. Osric leans on a staff polished by his hand. His beard is white, his back bent, but his eyes are quick beneath heavy lids. He has failed to repair a boundary ditch between his holding and his neighbour's. The neighbour says water now runs into his cabbage patch. Osric says the ditch was cut wrong in his father's time and has been foolish longer than anyone present has been alive. The steward listens, fingers folded. A younger man mutters that Osric is too old to keep the strip properly. At that, several older heads turn with dangerous slowness. Age may weaken the back, but it sharpens the ear for insult. Osric lifts his chin and says he can still mend a ditch if lent 2 sons. 3 dry days, and a neighbour who knows water runs downhill without needing a court to explain it. A small ripple of laughter moves through the hall. Even the steward's mouth twitches. The decision is practical. Osric must mend the ditch before the next court, and the neighbour must send 1 man to help, since the water troubles both holdings. A fine is held back unless the work is neglected. It is not mercy exactly, but neither is it ruin. Osric nods, and as he turns away, you see relief pass through his shoulders. Small judgments can keep an old person in place. Small judgments can also push one out. Next comes a widow, the same ale-selling woman from the hearth-house, still straight-backed beneath her patched mantle. She stands before the steward with her jug held like proof of character. Someone has accused her of selling short measure. Her mouth tightens, but she does not flinch. The ale taster, a man whose office sounds more pleasant than it likely is when performed properly, steps forward. He says her ale is honest and her measure fair. The widow looks neither grateful nor surprised. She has the air of a woman who expected truth to arrive, though not necessarily on time. The steward dismisses the complaint and fines the accuser a small sum for false presentation. The hall murmurs. Reputation moves like smoke here. It stains quickly and clears slowly. For a widow, especially one living by brewing, reputation may be bread, fuel, rent, and winter safety. A whispered accusation can bite harder than frost. You watch her tuck the matter away inside herself, not forgotten, simply stored. Some swear widows remember insults longer because they have fewer people around to distract them. Others say everyone remembers. Widows are just less obliged to pretend otherwise. The hen under the man's arm chooses this moment to cluck loudly. The clerk pauses his writing. The steward looks tired. Cases continue. A young couple seeks permission to take over a cottage after the husband's father died. Harriet is owed the best beast or its value, a payment due at death that reminds everyone land is held through custom, not sentiment. The couple has no beast worth naming, unless one counts a goat with a cloudy eye and a talent for escape. The steward considers. The Lord's rights must be preserved, he says. The hall hears the meaning payment must come somehow. A neighbour offers to stand surety. Another promises a day's labour. The couple bow their heads. You see how survival beyond 30 often depends on such knots of obligation. Family, neighbours, debt, favour, memory. No one lives alone here, not truly. And that is both blessing and burden. A person may be watched, judged, helped, envied, defended, and fined by the same people in the same week. Near the hearth, an old woman sits on a bench with 2 grandchildren pressed against her skirts. She's not called until late, but everyone knows why she's come. Her son, a villain on the manor, has died of a winter fever, leaving tools, a narrow strip of land, and questions. The children's mother is gone too, perhaps from childbirth, perhaps from illness. No one says loudly. The grandmother asks to keep the cottage until the elder boy can work it. Her hands twist in the edge of her cloak, but her voice is steady. The steward asks who will answer for the rent. Silence stretches. Then the ploughman you met outside, the one with the wrapped knee, steps forward. He says the boy can help with oxen come spring, and he will see the rent worked off if need be. Another man offers seed. The widow offers brewing grain at fair price after Lent. The old woman's face does not break, but her eyes shine. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether village kindness is born from love, fear, obligation, or the knowledge that anyone may be next. Perhaps it is all of them. The court records only the arrangement, not the pulse beneath it. You shift against the wall, feeling the hard bread heel beneath your cloak. The hall smells of smoke, damp wool, animal breath, and ink drying on parchment. Above the steward's table hangs a small painted shield, cracked along one edge. Beside it, a bundle of dried herbs has been tied to a beam, perhaps to sweeten the air, perhaps to discourage sickness, perhaps because someone's grandmother once insisted it should be there, and no one has dared remove it, even now. It is hard to tell whether custom survives because it works or because removing it feels like inviting trouble to supper. The suspicious monk appears near the doorway halfway through a dispute over a broken cart axle. He does not enter fully. He speaks to the clerk in a whisper, passing him a folded note. The clerk tucks it beneath his parchment and resumes writing without expression. You notice because you have begun to notice him everywhere at the gate, the alehouse, the market, the abbey cupboard. Now here. A man may be innocent and still develop the habits of a secret. The dog, peering through the open door behind him, seems more interested in the hen. The broken cart axle case turns heated. One man says he lent the cart sound. The other says the road broke it, and if roads can be fined, he will gladly accuse them. This earns another low laugh. The steward orders both men to pay for repair, since the cart served both households, and the axle was old enough to have heard 3 kings named in church. Practicality again. Not justice carved in marble, but justice patched like a cloak. As the hours pass, you begin to understand the manor court not as a place of grand law, but as a hearth where disputes are brought before they burn the house down. It is imperfect. It favours the Lord. It can bruise the poor. It can trap the unlucky in fines they can hardly pay. Yet it also holds memory. It recognises widows, boundaries, inheritances, duties, and promises spoken aloud before neighbours who will remember exactly when convenient. For those past 30, reputation becomes a second body. Your first body may ache, limp, cough, or fail to lift what it once did. The second body is made of what people say when you are not present. Honest brewer, careless ditch mender, good surety, slow payer, sharp-tongued widow, trustworthy midwife, quarrelsome brother, pious enough, lazy as wet rope. These names walk ahead of you into rooms and sometimes close doors before your hand reaches the latch. The bell from the abbey sounds again through the rain-soft air, faint but clear. The steward calls the last matters quickly, fines are named, pledges are taken, the clerk sands the ink. People begin to stir, stretch, mutter, gather children, lift baskets, reclaim hens. Outside, the dog springs up as if it too has completed a demanding legal duty. You step back into the yard beneath a sky the colour of old pewter. The widow passes you and gives a brief nod, victory held close. Osric leans on his staff while a younger neighbour, perhaps the reluctant one, speaks with him about the ditch. The grandmother gathers her 2 children and walks slowly toward the lane, not safe exactly, but less alone than before. The manor hall door closes behind you with a heavy wooden thud. You feel its lesson settle beside the others. To live past 30 here is to survive not only hunger, illness, childbirth, labour, and cold, but also obligation, rent, dues, memory, kinship, law, gossip, help owed, and help given. A person is held in place by cords, some soft as wool, some rough as hemp, some tight enough to hurt. Without them, one may fall. With them, one may also be bound. You break the smallest piece from the hard heel of bread and give it to the dog, who accepts the judgment without appeal. Then you turn toward the road beyond the manor, where pilgrims sometimes pass at dawn with badges on their cloaks and hopes tucked beneath their ribs, carrying their own aches towards saints who may or may not be listening. The road beyond the manor begins as a lane of churned mud between hedges, then slowly remembers it is meant to go somewhere. It bends away from the last cottages, past a pond filmed with grey sky, past a little wayside cross-leaning as though tired of blessing the same puddles, and out toward the open country where fields lie quiet under the soft, damp hush before dawn. You have slept a little since the manor court, not well, but enough to place one foot before the other without arguing aloud with your bones. The dog, who slept better than anyone and contributed nothing to rent, law, or household order, trots ahead with admirable confidence. Morning has not yet fully opened. The eastern sky is pale behind low clouds. Frost silvering the field edges melts wherever breath and hoof disturb it. Your cloak is stiff at the hem. The hard bread in your pouch knocks against your side with every step. A small edible stone of reassurance. Behind you, the town's bells are muted by distance. Ahead, another sound gathers, softer and more human voices, coughs, the clink of walking staffs, the creak of leather straps, and the steady murmur of people moving together along a pilgrim road. You reach them at the place where 3 tracks meet by a roadside shrine. The shrine is no great church, only a little wooden shelter set over a painted figure of St. Christopher, his face faded by rain, his staff crooked, the Christ child on his shoulder reduced by weather to a holy blur. Offerings lie beneath him, a bent pin, a scrap of ribbon, 3 pebbles, a crust of bread gone hard as penance, and a little clay bead. Some swear that leaving a stone at a roadside shrine lightens the miles ahead. Others say it only gives future travellers something to trip over. No one can quite agree, but almost everyone leaves something, if only a glance. The pilgrims gather there, adjusting packs and cloaks. There are perhaps a dozen of them, a widow with a greenish pilgrim badge sewn to her mantle. 2 brothers sharing a donkey, a young man limping from an old injury, a mother with a boy whose cough sounds too deep for his small chest, and 3 older men who look as though they have been arguing since before sunrise and intend to keep the tradition alive until Judgment Day. A lean friar stands near the shrine with a staff in one hand and a pouch of arms in the other, smiling with the weathered patience of a man accustomed to being asked how much farther it is. You join them without ceremony. Pilgrim roads welcome many kinds: the pious, the frightened, the guilty, the ill, the curious, the lonely, the bored, the hopeful, the commercially inventive, and those who simply prefer walking with company, because robbers are less enthusiastic about groups. Past 30, you understand the appeal. A road is hard enough without being alone inside your own thoughts for every mile. A woman beside you notices your careful step, knee. Cart, you say. She nods as though this explains a whole biography. Mine was a fall on chapel steps. I tell people it happened while fleeing temptation. Sounds better than missing the last stair. The first quiet laugh of the morning rises through the group, soft as breath. The friar lifts a hand, murmurs a blessing, and the little company begins to move. Staves touch the earth, cloaks whisper. The donkey sneezes and receives more sympathy than several humans. The road ahead is pale with frost in the higher places and black with mud in the hollows. Hedges crowd close at first, their bare twigs beaded with damp. Beyond them, winter fields spread wide, sleeping under the slow light. Pilgrim badges glint faintly as people walk scallop shells, little lead ampullae, stamped saints, crossed keys, a tiny figure of Thomas, perhaps, though the features have worn flat from fingers rubbing them for luck. Badges of proof, souvenir, prayer, and sometimes boast. They say you've gone somewhere holy, or mean to, or know a man who sells convincing tokens near a bridge. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about every pilgrim's honesty, but the badges shine all the same. The widow walking ahead of you carries several, one at her shoulder, one near her breast, another stitched at the edge of her hood. She catches you looking and says, "This one for my husband's fever, this one for my son at sea, this one because my sister said the shrine had excellent bread." Did it? Better than the relic, she says, then crosses herself quickly, just in case heaven has a sensitive ear. You walk beside her for a while. Her name is Avelina. She's past 40, though her stride remains steady. She has the face of someone who has buried enough hopes to stop wasting words on polite weather. Yet she is not grim. She tells you she walks once each year to a shrine where a saint is said to help aching eyes and stubborn hearts. "Mine are both poor," she says, "so I ask twice." The boy with a cough rides part of the way on the donkey when one of the brothers tires of pretending he is not tired. His mother keeps one hand on his back, feeling each breath. Around his neck hangs a little pouch sewn shut with red thread. Inside, she says, are fennel seeds, a scrap of blessed cloth, and a written charm against chest sickness. Some swear such pouches must not be opened, or the blessing escapes like steam from a pot. Others insist opening them proves whether anything was inside besides lint and optimism. The mother has no interest in either debate. She listens to the boy breathe and keeps walking. That is the thing about pilgrimage. It looks, from far away, like devotion moving across a map. Up close, it is sore feet, damp bread, shared gossip, blisters lanced by firelight, songs half remembered, and people carrying troubles that cannot be lifted by neighbours, courts, or herb stalls. A man with a failing hand walks to ask a saint for strength. A woman who survived childbirth walks in thanks. A widower walks because the house is too quiet. A thief walks because fear finally caught up with him. A merchant walks because holy roads are also good roads for selling pins. The soul may be the purpose, but the body does most of the work. By mid-morning, light spreads thinly across the fields. The road enters a wood where the ground is layered with wet leaves and the air smells of moss, bark, and old cold. Branches meet overhead, bare but tangled, making a dark lace against the sky. Here the group tightens. People speak less. Forest roads have reputations, wolves, robbers, spirits, outlaws, lost children, hermits with prophecies, and men who charge imaginary tolls all live in stories told about woods. Whether they live here today is less certain, but caution costs nothing except pride, and pride is a poor shield. Avelina tells you that some pilgrims carry a piece of bread marked with a cross to throw behind them if a ghost follows. Does it work, you ask? No one I know has returned to complain. This seems less like evidence than a tidy ending, but the road is dim, and you do not press the matter. You pass a tree hung with rags. Strips of cloth flutter from its lower branches: linen, wool, faded blue, dull red, undyed scraps gone grey with rain. A holy well lies somewhere in the hollow beyond it, the friar says. People tie rags there after washing sore limbs or sick eyes in the water, leaving the illness to rot away as the cloth decays. Some swear the tree has cured swellings, lameness, fever, and melancholy. Others say damp cloth rots faster than illness. Even now, it is hard to tell whether healing belongs to water, faith, time, or the relief of doing something with pain besides carrying it. One of the older men insists his cousin's wife regained use of 3 fingers after tying a strip at such a well. Another replies that the cousin's wife also claimed a goose foretold her marriage. The first says the goose was correct. The debate continues for nearly a mile and becomes strangely comforting, like the rhythm of feet. Near noon, the group stops in a clearing where a fallen log offers seating to those willing to accept moss as a cushion. You lower yourself carefully. Others do the same with a chorus of small grunts, sighs, and whispered invocations that prove pilgrimage is less a march of saints than a procession of knees. Bread appears from cloths, cheese is shared, dried apples pass from hand to hand. The friar produces a little salt, and for this he is regarded with almost dangerous affection. You eat your hard bread softened with a sip of ale from a leather bottle passed by one of the brothers. The ale tastes smoky and sour, but it is wet and therefore blessed in its own way. The dog receives crumbs from at least 4 people and begins to regard pilgrimage as a spiritual improvement over town life. A young man removes his shoe and studies a blister on his heel. The widow Avelina offers a clean strip of linen and a dab of grease from a little horn pot. Better now than worse later, she says. Past 30, people learn to honour small discomforts before they become tyrants. The young man thanks her, embarrassed. She ties the cloth with brisk gentleness. The friar speaks softly while people eat, not preaching loudly, only telling of the shrine ahead, where a saint's finger bone is kept in a silver case and brought out on feast days to bless the sick. A few listen with bowed heads, a few chew. One of the older men asks whether it is truly the saint's finger. The friar smiles. The saint knows, he says, which is either wisdom or excellent training. You think of the market relic seller, the abbey root, the charm pouch, the manor parchment. So many small things held against fear, lead badge, saint bone, tied rag, written word, blessed well. A person past 30 may become sceptical, yes, but also tender toward these gestures. You have seen enough suffering to understand why people travel miles for a chance, however thin. When the group rises again, the sky has darkened. Not night, but a gathering of weather. The road beyond the wood climbs toward open downs, and wind moves there with no hedges to slow it. Cloak snaps softly, the boy coughs, and his mother lifts him onto the donkey again. Avelina begins a low song, one of those pilgrim songs with more verses than anyone can properly remember. Others join where they can. Words fray, tune wanders, but rhythm holds. You walk in the middle of them. Your feet ache. Your knee complains. Your shoulders are damp beneath the cloak. Yet the company makes the hardship lighter. Not because it removes the burden, but because it gives the burden witnesses. This, too, is survival walking beside others who know the road is long and still keep the pace slow enough for the limping. Late in the afternoon, you reach a ridge where the land opens ahead. Far off, through mist and pale light, you see the tower of a small priory or pilgrim hospital, no more than a dark finger against the sky. Smoke lifts from somewhere near it. The sight passes through the group like warmth. Someone says there will be straw. Someone else says there may be beans. The dog hears the word beans and looks optimistic despite having no clear understanding of agriculture. The bells of that distant house begin to ring, faint at first, then clearer as the wind shifts. Their sound comes across fields, ditches, hedges, and the tired heads of pilgrims. It calls not only the devout, but the weary. It promises no cure, not truly. It promises a roof, a bowl, a place to wash feet, perhaps a candle before a saint who has heard centuries of whispered bargains. You draw your cloak close and keep walking toward it. The road under your boots is still mud and stone. Your body is still your body, marked by years, work, hunger, chill, and all the little injuries that make a person careful. But ahead, a bell rings through the evening air, and around you pilgrims move together in a slow, murmuring line, each carrying an ache, a vow, a hope, a memory, or a fear. You are past 30, and you understand now that survival is sometimes no more glamorous than this one more ridge climbed, one more crust shared, one more prayer breathed into the cold, one more step taken because others are taking theirs beside you. The priory bell keeps ringing as you descend from the ridge, and its sound seems to gather the pilgrims out of the wind one by one. The road dips between low fields where frost lingers in the furrows, pale and stubborn even beneath the grey afternoon. Your boots slide in the mud, then crunch over frozen patches where the ground has hardened just enough to betray you differently. Around you, cloaks flap, staves tap, breath clouds, and the little company grows quieter as the promise of shelter becomes real enough to taste. The building ahead is not large. A low stone guest house leans beside a chapel, with a walled garden behind it and a barn crouched near a yard of trampled straw. Smoke rises from a kitchen chimney in a thin, steady line. The sight of smoke after a cold road has its own holiness. It says there is fire. Fire means hands can open again. Fire means wet hems may steam. Fire means someone has thought past the present misery and stored wood under cover. In winter, that is almost a form of prophecy. You pass through a wooden gate where a lay sister stands with a lantern, her face round and red from the cold. She counts the arrivals with a glance and directs you toward the guest house. The dog slips through beside you with the air of an animal who has never been denied entrance anywhere in its life, which is historically untrue but emotionally convincing. No one stops it this time. Perhaps mercy extends farther in bad weather. Perhaps the lay sister has seen enough pilgrims to know that arguing with a wet dog is beneath the dignity of the evening. Inside, the guest house is dim, smoky, and blessedly warmer than the road. Rushes lie thick over the floor, fresher than those in the town hall, and scattered among them are dried herbs that release a faint sweetness underfoot. A hearth burns along one wall, not roaring, for wood is too precious to be theatrical, but steady and deep, its embers red beneath blackened logs. Cloaks are hung on pegs, shoes are scraped. People lower themselves onto benches with the soft groans of travellers who have discovered that arrival is not the same thing as comfort, but it is a close cousin. You sit near the fire, stretching your hands toward it. At first the warmth hurts, prickling along your fingers and palms. Then it sinks inward, passing through skin, knuckle, wrist, into places the wind has been living all day. Steam rises from the hem of your cloak. The dog settles so near the hearth that one ear begins to warm before the rest of it, which it accepts as the natural order of creation. A brother brings a basin of water for feet. It is not hot, but it is not cold enough to inspire despair. Pilgrims wash in turn, loosening mud from toes, inspecting blisters, binding sore places with strips of linen. The young man from the forest, the one Evelina helped, unwraps his heel and finds the blister no worse. He looks at her with gratitude. She shrugs as if saving a heel from foolishness is the least a person can do. Beyond the guest house door, the yard is full of winter's practical secrets. You see them whenever someone enters or leaves stacked firewood under a lean-to, bundles of kindling tied with willow, barrels beneath a roof, sacks carried toward a storehouse with a heavy lock. A priory survives winter by prayer, yes, but also by counting grain, beans, peas, onions, salt fish, apples, fuel, candles, lamp oil, hay for animals, straw for beds, wool for blankets, herbs hung before damp ruins them. Holiness may guide the soul, but someone must still know how many cabbages remain. After a while, the lay sister brings bowls of thickened pottage. It is richer than the alehouse version, though not by courtly standards. Barley, beans, cabbage, leeks, and a little smoky flavour from bacon, or the memory of bacon. Hard bread comes with it, and a small piece of cheese sharp enough to wake a tired tongue. The pilgrims eat in the hush of serious gratitude. No one wastes breath praising the meal too early. Compliments can wait until the bowl is empty and the danger of losing focus has passed. The mother feeds the coughing boy slowly, blowing on each spoonful. Avelina dips bread into her bowl until it softens. One of the old men asks whether there will be more, and his companion tells him to let the first bowl arrive in his stomach before sending scouts for the second. The friar laughs quietly. Even the lay sister smiles, though she does not promise more. In winter, promises are measured by the ladle. When you finish, warmth spreads through you, not like summer, but like a small lamp carried down a dark passage. Your belly is not heavy, it is steadied. That is the winter art, not plenty, but steadiness. To live beyond 30 in this world, you must learn the difference. A feast may make a tale, but a storehouse makes survival. Later, while others settle around the fire, you step with the lay sister into the yard to help carry a basket from the storehouse. She does not ask if you're strong, she simply hands you one side, which is more efficient and less flattering. The cold meets you sharply after the guest house warmth. The sky has lowered, and a few flakes of snow begin to drift through the air. Not yet a storm, only a warning written softly. The storehouse door is oak, bound with iron, and secured by a key large enough to suggest it could also serve as a weapon in a theological disagreement. The lay sister draws it from her belt and turns it in the lock. Inside, the smell is dry and close-grained dust, apples, straw, onions, smoke from cured meat, salt, and old wood. It is the smell of forethought. Shelves line the walls. Sacks of barley and oats sit raised from the floor on planks to keep damp and rats away. Strings of onions hang from beams. Bundles of dried herbs dangle upside down. A barrel of salted fish rests in the corner beneath a cloth. There are crocks sealed with fat, baskets of wrinkled apples, peas in sacks, beans in jars, and small bundles marked with bits of wool so the sisters can tell at a glance what belongs to guest house, infirmary, kitchen, or chapel. No one can quite agree whether bay leaves truly keep weevils out of grain, the lay sister says, but they use them anyway when they can get them. They also keep cats near the stores, though cats, she adds, are saints in the matter of mice and sinners in almost every other respect. You think of the dog outside and wisely avoid taking a side in this ancient dispute. She checks a sack for damp, lifts a cloth from a basket of apples, and frowns at one softening fruit. Rot spreads quickly if ignored. One bad apple is not a proverb here, it is a small emergency. She removes it, cuts away the spoiled part with a knife, and sets the rest aside for immediate cooking. Waste is not a sin only because preachers say so. Waste is frightening. Waste is winter stealing in daylight. You help carry a basket of onions and dried beans back toward the kitchen. Snow begins to thicken, each flake catching on your sleeve before melting into the wool. The yard darkens early. A boy drives 2 goats into the barn. A brother hauls another armful of wood under cover. Chickens murmur from their roosts with the offended softness of creatures who believe weather should have consulted them first. Near the kitchen door, you see the fuel pile more clearly split logs, brushwood, peat blocks stacked beneath thatch, bundles of dried reeds. Fuel is food for the fire, and fire is life stretched through cold months. Without it, bread does not bake, pottage does not simmer, wet clothes do not dry, old bones do not loosen, and the sick lie deeper in danger. Some swear certain woods burn with better luck than others. Ash is praised, oak respected. Elder sometimes avoided because folk say spirits or witches dislike having their tree disturbed. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such rules arise from belief, experience, or someone long ago trying to stop fools from burning poor fuel. Inside the kitchen, heat blooms hard against your cheeks. It is a busy, low room blackened by years of smoke. A great pot hangs over the fire, loaves cool on boards. A girl turns oatcakes on a flat stone. The soft apple from the storehouse is chopped into a small pan with ale and a pinch of spice. Perhaps for the coughing boy, or perhaps for whoever the lay sister decides looks most in need. Medieval charity often has excellent eyesight. You return to the guest house carrying the smell of onions and wood smoke with you. The pilgrims have shifted into evening positions. Boots near the fire, blankets claimed, pouches tucked beneath heads, arguments softened by food. The friar is telling a tale about a saint who multiplied loaves during famine, though one of the older men whispers that if the saint is still practicing, he knows several villages that would appreciate a visit. Avelina sits near the wall, sewing a tear in her cloak with a needle drawn from a little bone case. She stitches carefully, small even movements in the firelight. Winter finds every hole, she says without looking up. She is right. Winter is less an event than an inspector. It tests roofs, seams, doors, boots, granaries, tempers, marriages, joints, and faith. It finds which household stored enough peas, which children have shoes, which old people have kin, which chimneys draw properly, which blankets are mostly wishful thinking. To survive it after 30, when the body no longer shrugs off cold as it once did, requires layers upon layers, wool over linen, straw under sleeping bodies, shutters barred, rushes renewed, broth kept hot, candles saved, doors corked with rags, animals brought close, neighbours watched. You think of the town's old man binding his knee, the women washing cloth beside the hearth, Osric and his ditch, the mother listening to her child's breath, the monk cooling a fevered brow. All of them are part of the same winter storehouse, in a way. Not only sacks and barrels, but skills, habits, warnings, favours owed, paths remembered, remedies tried, tales told beside the fire so the young will know what not to do when frost comes quietly. As darkness gathers outside, the snow turns steady. It whispers against the shutters and powders the yard. Someone bars the guest-house door with an oak beam. The sound settles in you wood against iron, safety made audible. A tallow lamp is lit, then a beeswax candle near the small wall shrine, its cleaner flame reserved for the holy image above it. The candlelight touches painted saints, the rim of a water jug, the silvered badge on Avelina's cloak, the dog's sleeping nose. The lay sister brings in another small armful of blankets, rough wool smelling of storage, lanolin, and cedar chips. Some swear cedar keeps moths away. and for once, most people seem willing to agree. You receive one blanket and wrap it around your shoulders. It scratches your neck. It is wonderful. The coughing boy sleeps at last, his pouch resting against his chest. His mother does not sleep. She watches him by firelight, one hand near his mouth to feel the warmth of his breath. The old men play a quiet game with marked stones. The friar mends his sandal strap. A novice whispers the hours under his breath so he will not forget them later. Outside, snow gathers in the yard, covering mud, cart tracks, and the dog's earlier paw prints beneath a soft, pale hush. You sit with your back against the wall and feel the day's cold slowly leave you. Not entirely. Some of it has gone into the bones and will emerge later as stiffness, like a guest who refuses to depart. But enough leaves, enough warmth remains. Your bread is safe, your cloak is drying, your feet are wrapped, and the roof above you holds. In this world, winter is not scenery. It is an adversary with patience, and every storehouse is a small rebellion against it. Every onion hung from a beam, every log stacked dry, every blanket patched, every barrel sealed, every candle saved for a fever night says the same thing, in its humble way, not yet. The cold may come, the dark may lengthen, the fields may sleep under frost, but hands have prepared, and bodies gather near the fire, and the bell will ring the hours until morning finds them still breathing. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the snow touch the shutters. Around you, the pilgrims breathe in uneven rhythm, the fire clicks softly, the dog dreams, paws twitching, perhaps chasing a legal hen through a warmer and more generous court. You almost smile. Tomorrow there will be roads again. Tonight there is stored grain, stacked wood, thick pottage, wool around your shoulders, and the deep, quiet knowledge that surviving beyond 30 may depend less on bravery than on whether someone remembered to keep the beans dry. By morning the snow has softened the world without improving the road. It lies over the yard in a pale coverlet, innocent from a distance and treacherous underfoot, hiding ruts, stones, frozen puddles, and every practical joke the earth prepared overnight. You leave the priory after a breakfast of oatcake and warm ale, with your cloak dry enough to be called dry by charitable people, and the dog trotting beside you in excellent spirits. Its paws punch little dark marks through the snow, as though signing its name on behalf of all creatures who believe breakfast was too small. The pilgrim company breaks apart at the fork below the priory. Avelina and the friar continue toward the shrine. The mother with the coughing boy remains behind another day for rest, and the 3 arguing old men take the southern road, still debating whether a goose can prophesy marriage. You stand for a moment beneath a bare ash tree, listening to their voices fade. The bell behind you rings the hour, and the sound follows them all in different directions. You turn toward a village said to have an alehouse with a sound roof and a fire worth speaking of kindly. The road dips through fields where hedges rise black against white. Smoke lifts from scattered cottages. A crow lands on a fence post and watches you with the look of a small judge considering whether you're worth the paperwork. Your boots grow wet again. Your knee complains again. The cold presses its fingers into the places yesterday's fire had nearly persuaded to forgive the world. By late afternoon, the village appears in a hollow, gathered around a church, a pond, and a green where sheep have left evidence of their opinions. The alehouse stands near the road with a painted board swinging from a bracket a foaming cup, though the paint has flaked enough that it could also be a troubled cloud. Light glows through the shutters. Smoke rises. Voices thicken behind the door. You step inside with the dog at your heel and are met by warmth, damp wool, spilled ale, old rushes, wood smoke, and the deep human music of people grateful to be indoors before night. The room is low-ceilinged, its beams black with soot and its walls hung with tools, drying herbs, a cracked shield, and a horseshoe nailed above the door to keep luck from wandering out. No one can quite agree whether a horseshoe should point upward to hold luck, or downward to pour blessing over the threshold. This one points sideways, perhaps because whoever nailed it had been sampling the ale. Still, no one has removed it. Which tells you all you need to know about the power of custom and ladders. You find a place on a bench near the hearth. The fire is stronger than the priories, not because villagers are richer, but because alehouses understand atmosphere as well as survival. A pot of pottage simmers near the coals. A tallow candle spits on the table. The floor rushes are mixed with rosemary, though the older layers beneath have developed their own opinions. The dog circles once, then settles beneath the bench, where crumbs, warmth, and strategic invisibility meet. Around you sit the village's evening court of talk carters, shepherds, a thatcher with straw still clinging to his sleeve, 2 women sharing a jug, an old man with a cloudy eye, a young servant trying to look older, and a broad grandmother whose face is folded into such firm lines that even candlelight respects them. The alewife moves among them with a jug in one hand, and the expression of someone who knows every secret in the room but prefers payment before confession. You're given a cup of ale, darker than the morning drink and stronger by enough to make your stomach notice. You sip slowly, past 30. You have learned that ale may warm a person, cheer a person, and betray a person, often in that order. The man beside you has not learned this, or has learned it and chosen scholarship through repetition. Conversation drifts first through weather, then prices, then illness, then age, which is the natural downhill course of winter talk. Someone mentions a man in the next parish who has reached 60. This produces the kind of silence usually reserved for eclipses, royal deaths, and exceptionally large turnips. 60, says the young servant, doubtful. Can a man be 60? The cloudy-eyed elder snorts. You think the body stops counting because you grow bored. The broad grandmother says she knew a woman who lived near 70 and kept all her wits except where her son-in-law was concerned, which may have been judgment rather than decline. Another man claims his uncle lived to 80 by eating onions every day and never sleeping with his feet toward the door. The thatcher says his own uncle ate onions every day and died at 32, but no one liked him, so perhaps the onions lacked encouragement. A soft laugh moves through the benches. The alewife refills cups without needing to ask. Here, in the glow of the alehouse, old age becomes story. People measure it by winters, teeth, memory, grandchildren, stubbornness, and the ability to rise from a stool without making too much noise. No one fully agrees on when a person becomes old. 30 is seasoned, 40 is proven, 50 is formidable, 60 is almost a local landmark. Beyond that, one becomes less a person than a tale told to make children eat broth and adults reconsider lifting heavy sacks alone. Yet the laughter is gentle, because everyone in the room is listening for themselves. The young servant laughs loudest, but he touches his own jaw when toothache is mentioned. The thatcher rubs his shoulder. One of the women flexes her fingers near the fire. You feel your knee warm slowly and know that every joke rests on fear's lap. The cloudy-eyed elder leans forward, cup in hand. His name is Martin, and he has survived enough years to have opinions worn smooth by repetition. He says his father swore that age enters through the feet if a person lets them stay wet. Dry stockings, he says. lifting one finger, are a wall against death. The alewife says that if dry stockings kept death away, rich men would never die and washerwomen would rule Christendom. Martin considers this, then admits death is crafty. Some swear that sleeping with a knife under the bed cuts cramps before they climb into the legs. Others hang vervain over the door, carry hazelnuts against rheumatism, rub goose grease on the chest, drink hot ale with egg and honey, or tie red thread around a wrist when fever threatens. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these customs cure the body, soothe the mind, or simply give hands something useful to do while waiting. But in the alehouse, every remedy has a defender. Every defender has a story, and every story improves slightly with ale. The broad grandmother, whose name is Elswith, tells of a neighbour who kept a smooth black stone in her apron to draw pains from the hip. Each night she placed it in the hearth ashes to burn the ache away. The young servant asks whether the stone ever cracked. Elswith says no, but the neighbour's husband did after 20 years of complaining. Again, the laughter stays low and warm, like embers turning. A man near the door speaks of signs that death is near dogs howling at no moon, bees leaving a hive, a candle guttering blue, 3 knocks heard where no hand knocks. At this, the dog beneath your bench lifts its head. Several people glance down. You gently rest a hand on its back, as if to prevent it from becoming involved in village prophecy. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which signs matter and which are invented by those who enjoy making dusk worse. Still, when a candle flutters oddly, people notice. The alehouse door opens, and a gust of cold pushes through, carrying snowflakes and the smell of night. In steps the suspicious monk, hood dusted white, linen pouch once again hidden beneath his robe. For a moment, conversation thins. He looks around, sees no one he wishes to greet or avoid more than usual, and approaches the fire. The alewife offers him hot ale. He asks for water. The room absorbs this as evidence of either holiness or trouble. He stands not far from you, warming red hands above the flames. Martin asks whether monks live longer because they pray more or because they eat better. The monk's mouth tightens in what might almost be a smile. We rise too early to live long by comfort, he says. But bells keep a man from wasting the day. The thatcher says bells keep a man from sleeping, which is not the same thing. The monk accepts this with a nod and sits at the edge of the bench. Someone asks whether the abbey has records of the oldest person in the district. The monk says the records have many ages written, but ages are slippery. Some people count from baptism, some from a remembered famine, some from a king's coronation, and some from when a comet frightened everyone's chickens. No one can quite agree whether old Martin is 58 or 63, for example, because Martin himself claims different numbers depending on whether he wants respect or exemption from roof work. Martin raises his cup, both are sacred. The monk's eyes soften. He tells, after some urging, of a brother who copied manuscripts until his sight failed, then taught novices by memory, correcting their Latin from across the room by the sound of hesitation. He lived past 70, they say, though the monk admits monastery years may stretch in retelling like old leather. The brother believed long life was not granted for pleasure, but for usefulness. Elswith replies that pleasure is useful, especially when served warm in a cup. The alewife says she'll have that carved over the door if anyone can pay the scribe. The fire burns lower, more candles are lit, a bowl of pottage reaches you, thick with beans and cabbage, and you eat while the stories deepen. The villagers speak of those who died young too, but softly, without lingering. A miller crushed by a wheel, a mother lost in childbed, twins buried before baptism, a boy taken by summer fever. The names pass through the room like small shadows. Then someone adds wood to the fire, and the talk turns back toward endurance. Because grief has sat here before and knows where to place itself. You realize that alehouse tales make age bearable by turning it into something shared. A private ache becomes a joke about hinges. A fear of death becomes a story about onions, wet stockings, and prophetic geese. A bent back becomes proof that a person has carried enough years to advise others where not to step. These tales do not soften the truth completely. They wrap it in smoke and warmth so it can be held for a while. The suspicious monk leaves before night grows too deep. As he passes you, the linen pouch brushes the edge of your sleeve. It smells faintly of dried roots and wax. He pauses, as if he might speak, then only says, "Keep your feet dry." This from a man of mysteries feels almost disappointing in its practicality. Yet it may be the wisest thing he has said. Snow continues outside, tapping lightly against the shutters. The alehouse grows drowsier, cups empty, voices lower. Elswith hums under her breath. Martin dozes upright, still holding his cup with remarkable devotion. The dog sleeps with its chin on your boot, trusting you not to move without formal notice. You sit there, warmed by fire and story, and let the room settle around you. In this village, age is feared, mocked, honoured, bargained with, and invited to sit near the hearth. Surviving beyond 30 does not make you safe from the world. It makes you fluent in its small warnings. It teaches you to laugh carefully, to listen closely, to value dry stockings, honest ale, and people who remember your name when you're no longer strong enough to shout it. At last, the alewife banks the fire. The room dims to red coals and candle stubs. Outside, snow covers the road toward the Lord's Keep, where other kinds of old bodies wait soldiers with stiff sword arms, servants with tired feet, veterans who have survived not only labour and winter, but the hard discipline of walls, watchfires, and men who command from warmer rooms. You wrap your cloak close, finish the last sour sip of ale, and prepare to follow that road when morning comes. Morning lifts slowly over the village, pale and cold, and the alehouse releases you with the reluctant kindness of a place that has kept you alive for one night, and now must return you to the road. The fire is ash, the benches are sticky, the rushes look as though they know too much, and the alewife is already moving about with a broom in one hand and a ledger of invisible grievances in the other. Martin still sleeps upright near the hearth, until Elswith prods him with her staff and tells him that if he means to die there, he should at least pay for another cup first. He opens one eye and declares himself restored by medical ale. No one can quite agree whether ale cures more than it causes, but in the grey morning, most are willing to let the claim stand unchallenged. You step outside with the dog pressing ahead, eager for snow, scents, and whatever crumbs the world may have dropped while sleeping. The road toward the Lord's Keep climbs from the village hollow, passing between frosted hedges and fields where the stubble pricks through white like bristles on an old chin. The air tastes clean in the way very cold air does, as if it has been scrubbed with ice and has no intention of apologizing. Your breath rises before you. Your boots crunch, then slide, then find mud beneath the snow where the earth has not frozen hard enough to be trusted. The keep appears long before you reach it, high on a low hill where the road bends around a stand of bare elms. It is not a storybook castle with banners flying in brave sunshine. It is squat, grey, practical, and damp, with a curtain wall patched in places, a tower with narrow windows, a timbered hall within, and smoke lifting from kitchen and guardroom fires. The ditch below the wall holds black water crusted with ice. A bridge crosses it, slick with straw, laid down for grip. At the gate, 2 men-at-arms stand under a pentice roof, spears in hand, cloaks wrapped tight. They look less like shining warriors than very cold men regretting several life decisions. One of them calls for your business. Shelter, you say, and perhaps work for an hour if hands are wanted. Hands are almost always wanted. The guard studies you, then the dog, then your boots, as though boots reveal moral character better than faces. Perhaps they do. He waves you through after taking a small toll in suspicion. The dog enters with royal confidence, having learned that gates, like people, may be overcome by persistence and a harmless expression. Inside the outer yard, life gathers around stone, timber, and authority. Servants cross between buildings with baskets, buckets, armloads of wood, sacks of grain. A boy leads a pony toward the stable. Chickens scratch near the kitchen wall despite the cold, their faith in the ground's generosity apparently unshaken by snow. A woman with keys at her belt directs 2 younger maids carrying folded linen, her voice low but sharp enough to slice rushes. Above, on the wall walk, a soldier stamps his feet and blows into his hands, watching the road you came by as if it has personally offended him. You're led first toward the guardroom, a low chamber just inside the gate where the fire smokes badly and the benches are carved with names, notches, and crude little crosses scratched by bored hands over many winters. The room smells of damp wool, leather, iron, smoke, onions, and the sour tang of men who have worn padded garments longer than kindness recommends. Spears lean against the wall, shields hang from pegs, a few helmets sit on a shelf like empty, sulking heads. There are soldiers here past 30, and they are not the bright young blades sung of in taverns. They are thicker at the waist, slower to rise, careful with their shoulders, and marked by old service. One has a scar running from ear to chin, pale against weathered skin. Another wears a leather brace around his wrist. A third sits by the fire rubbing his thigh where an arrow once entered, and, according to his own account, took up residence in his memory even after it was drawn out. He's not yet old, perhaps, but the body does not care what word you use when it decides to keep records. The scarred man offers you a place near the wall and asks whether the road from the village is passable. Passable in the sense that it permits passage, you say, not in the sense that it approves. He grunts. This seems to satisfy him. A servant brings a pot of something hot and thin to the guardroom, and wooden cups are filled. It is broth with onions and maybe a little barley, more warmth than meal, but no one complains. Soldiers, like labourers, learn the value of anything hot-handed to them without argument. You drink and feel your fingers thaw around the cup. The wrist-brace soldier sees you looking at the strip of leather. Practice yard, he says. Years ago. Young fool swung too hard. You. Him, he says. Then, after a pause, also me for standing there. This earns the kind of laughter that does not disturb the fire. Around the guardroom, old injuries are currency. Men spend them in stories, not because pain is noble, but because telling it gives shape to what still aches. A broken rib from a tourney, a frostbitten toe from winter watch, a spear cut across the shoulder, a bad fall from a wall ladder, a jaw broken in training by a cousin who insisted it was an accident until guilt aged him into honesty. Some swear rubbing old wounds with oil blessed on St. Martin's Day keeps them from throbbing in damp weather. Others trust hot stones wrapped in cloth or mustard plasters or simply cursing until the pain grows bored. No one can quite agree which works best. The scarred man says the finest cure is to be 20 again, but since no apothecary has yet stocked it, he accepts hot broth. After a while, you're taken across the yard to help carry split logs into the hall. The keep's great hall is larger than the manor court, but not so warm as it wants to be. Its high roof vanishes into smoke-dark beams. Tapestries hang along the walls, not merely for beauty, but to blunt draughts that enter through stone with the skill of thieves. Rushes cover the floor, fresh near the dais, older near the screen's passage where servants move. A long table stands at one end beneath the Lord's painted arms. At this hour, the Lord is absent, which improves the room's mood considerably. Servants prepare the hall for evening. A steward counts trenchers. 2 boys carry pitchers. A cook's assistant brings in a basket of coarse bread and is scolded for dragging snow across the rushes, though the snow, having melted, refuses to be removed by moral instruction. An older servant, the woman with keys, checks a chest near the wall and locks it with an iron key large enough to bend a careless belt. She notices your glance and says, "Linen, plate, wax, spices, accounts. All the things people steal when they think God is looking elsewhere." Some swear iron keys hung near a bed keep nightmares away. Others say keys only keep away people without better tools. In this hall, their power made small enough to carry. You help stack logs near the hearth. The fire is wide, laid on stone, throwing heat outward but losing much of it upward into the rafters. A spit hangs ready. The smell from the kitchen passage is rich compared with village fare roasting meat, broth, herbs, onions frying in fat, bread warming, ale being poured, and something sweet perhaps made from apples cooked with spice. A lord's household eats better than most, though even here winter narrows the table. Salted meats, stored grain, root vegetables, dried peas, cheese, preserved fruits. Fine vessels may hold them, but the season still has its say. A veteran stands near the hearth, watching servants work. His hair is grey beneath a simple cap, and his left arm hangs a little stiffly. He wears no armour now, only a thick tunic and belt, but others give him room. He may be the household sergeant, or once was. His face has the calm severity of a man who has outlived both enemies and most illusions about them. He asks your age. Past 30. Then you know enough to duck. Usually after learning when I should have ducked earlier. He nods, approving perhaps of the education. He tells you that the hardest part of service is not battle. Despite what singers prefer, it is the waiting, the cold watch, the wet boots, the stale bread on campaign, the fever in camp, the horse that kicks, the commander who believes mud can be hurried by shouting, and the long return home when wounds have healed crookedly. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether glory exists because men see it, or because minstrels are paid to polish rust. The veteran looks toward the yard and says glory is lighter than a shield but much less useful in rain. You follow him up the stair to the wall walk, where the wind takes immediate offence at your existence. From here, the country spreads below in dull winter colours, white fields, black hedges, brown road, smoke lifting from the village hollow, the distant dark smudge of woods where pilgrims walked. The guard on watch stamps his feet again. His beard is frosted at the edges. A small brazier glows in an iron pan near the tower door, but it seems more symbolic than effective. Standing watch is work of stillness, and stillness in cold can be crueler than walking. Fingers numb around spear shafts, feet burn, then dull. Old injuries wake. A soldier past 30 may prefer movement. even hard movement, because at least it keeps blood honest. The watchman tells you he keeps a charm sewn into his glove, a little scrap marked with the name of St. George. Against fear, you ask. Against cold, he says. Fear at least warms a man. The veteran almost smiles. Below out in the yard, a young page slips on ice while carrying an empty bucket and lands with a thump that echoes faintly. He rises quickly, looks around, and walks with great dignity in the wrong direction. No one laughs loudly. This is either compassion or the fact that everyone has fallen there before. You return to the hall as evening begins to gather. Torches are lit in iron brackets. Their flames snap and smoke. Beeswax candles are set on the high table, while tallow candles serve the lower places. Servants lay trenchers of coarse bread that will soak up sauces and become part of the meal. A clerk enters with a roll of accounts tucked under one arm. For a moment you think of the ink-stained scribe, the suspicious monk, the folded notes travelling through market and court. Here too. Writing binds bodies to duty wages owed, grain counted, repairs listed, taxes due, weapons issued, cloth measured, names recorded for service. The suspicious monk appears again before supper, admitted through the hall by the steward. He speaks quietly with the veteran near the hearth. This time you're close enough to see the linen pouch opened. Inside, not the mandrake root now, but a small folded parchment sealed with wax, perhaps carried from abbey to keep. The veteran reads it slowly. His face changes not at all, which suggests either discipline or bad news practiced over many years. Then he nods and tucks it into his belt. The dog, having found its way into the hall under cover of servant traffic, sits beside you and stares at the high table as if prepared to offer military counsel in exchange for scraps. Supper comes in waves of movement. The Lord's household gathers. The high table receives better cuts, brighter candles, finer cups. Below, retainers, servants, and lesser guests eat pottage thickened with bread, salted meat, onions, and ale. You receive a portion near the lower end of the hall. It is warm, salty, and rich enough after the road to feel nearly festive. Around you, men and women eat with the focus of people who understand that meals are not only pleasure but repair. The veteran sits not far away. Younger soldiers ask him about battles, pressing for the sharp, shining parts. He gives them weather instead, mud that swallowed carts, bowstrings spoiled by rain, men sick from bad water, horses lost to winter, armour straps stiff with frost, a siege where more died of flux than arrows. The young listen, disappointed at first, then quieter. Past 30. The body has little patience for romance that forgets blisters. Some swear old soldiers can sense storms in their wounds. The veteran says this is nonsense, then rubs his stiff arm as the wind rises against the shutters. No one comments. Courtesy sometimes means allowing a man to contradict himself in peace. Night deepens outside the keep. The hall grows louder for a while, then softer. Servants clear trenchers. Dogs, including your companion, perform important floor inspections. The steward locks the chest. The guards change watch. The returning men, stamping snow from boots and reaching for the fire with faces grey from cold. One by one, bodies settle into their assigned places: benches, pallets, corners near the screens, the guardroom, the stable loft, the tower stair. You sit near the great hearth and feel the keep's lesson press close. Here, survival beyond 30 has a different shape than in field, cottage, court, or pilgrim road. It wears scars from blades and bruises from training. Yes, but also the deep weariness of service cold watches, heavy mail, hunger on campaign, discipline, obedience, and the constant need to appear stronger than one feels. A lord's wall may protect, but it also demands. It asks bodies to stand in wind, carry arms, ride wet roads, guard sleeping households, and grow old under the weight of other men's quarrels. The fire burns low. The veteran rises stiffly, his left arm close to his side. As he passes, he pauses and says, "Past 30 is not old. No, it is when you learn what must be saved." Then he moves toward the guardroom, leaving you with the words and the steady hiss of damp wood on coals. Outside, the wind presses against stone. Inside, torchlight trembles over shields, keys, rushes, patched cloaks, old scars, and sleeping dogs. You wrap your blanket closer, knowing the road will draw you onward again toward shrines, sins, suspicions, and the uneasy ways people make meaning from illness and misfortune. But for now, the keep holds, the watch changes, and the bodies within its walls endure another winter night.